Hey, spookies. I don't know what that is. Chan and I started doing it. It's a thing now. I'm Stephen Eamon. I'm one half of Machina Corpse, a spooky new comics publisher, and this is Let's Make Comics. Consider this like the pilot episode. I don't have any lighting at the moment. It's a dark, rainy day. By the next episode, everything's going to be completely different. I'm probably going to be recast. So as I'm working on my comics for Machina Corpse, I'm going to invite you to sit along and watch me draw and take you on this journey with me. There's a whole lot to get into. This first episode, I'm going to tell you about how I got to this point. Spoiler, it's a lot like Saw. I kind of woke up in a basement with a pad and a pencil. So let's get right into it. Let's make some comics. Alright, so I know what you're thinking. Steve Eamon, Machina Corpse, terrifying individual, horror, spooky, all that stuff. And it's true. But prior to this, I was doing young adult novels. I did 3 books, Happy Face, Wintertown, and Bright Lights, Dark Nights. And I love the genre. I love doing young adult. The first major project I'm going to be doing with Machina Corpse could be categorized as young adult. Just, really dark, messed up, weird kind of young adult. I don't think like mainstream publishing would necessarily look at what it is that I want to do. It's stuff that's out there, but I'm positive that there is an audience for it. And that's where doing something with Machina Corpse, kind of going out on my own, makes a lot of sense. Prior to doing the young adult stuff, I did a comic book called Emo Boy. If you haven't read that, I'm actually uploading it currently on Webtoons. I'll leave a link to that below. I always knew that I would come back to comics at some point. I've always wanted to be a comics creator. I always wanted to be an illustrator as well as a writer. I spent the last few years working on a graphic novel, this kind of bloated, epic 400-page fully painted book that I did quite a bit of and ended up kind of falling on my face. It didn't really take off or go anywhere. And at the same time, Chandra had just gotten the rights to her comic, The God Machine, back. She had been really interested in publishing herself and starting this Machina Corpse project. We were both kind of setting off on our own and wanting to prove that we had something good to offer. We decided to kickstart our first comic. I wanted to do a prequel to this horror comic that I couldn't really get anywhere with my agent or editor, but it was something that I kept on coming back to and developing in my head, so this was a great chance for me to do that. My comic in the Kickstarter is called 1983. It actually serves as a prequel to something larger that I'm going to be doing really soon. So something that I learned doing the Kickstarter, so much of the support came from followers and fans of Chandra's. And it dawned on me that despite having successful books and selling a lot of copies, I don't have that following. A lot of my fans that bought Happy Face and that bought Wintertown weren't necessarily following me to whatever project I was doing next. And it caused me to reevaluate my goals for this upcoming year. I think one of the big things I want to do is reestablish myself as a comics creator, as an illustrator. I want to grow my fan base. I want to communicate more with the people that do appreciate my work and follow me. I mean, it makes sense to me that a lot of people that probably love my work, they probably know me through my comics and through my books, but they don't really know me. And I think there's a lot of room for improvement in that, and that's part of why I'm doing this YouTube series, is to let people in and let people get to know me as a person, as an artist, see what my interests are, where my head is at. And that's going to be kind of my big project for the upcoming year, is doing these regular videos, putting a lot of art out there for free. It's going to be an ongoing process, and I hope that it builds through the year. I hope I get better at it. It's not comfortable for me. Social media in general is not comfortable for me. I'm not very good at it. I'm not good at talking about myself. When I go on Twitter, I don't know what to talk about a lot of the time. Right now, my mind is set on comic books, on creating comics, on making something really weird and dark. I have a great story that I'm going to be telling. And doing that, doing Machina Corpse, helping Chan with her next project, that's going to be 2020. That's what I'm going to be working on. And I get that it's going to take time. It's going to take a whole lot of precious time. It's going to take money and time to do it right now. But that's the plan, and I hope that you come along with me. Oh, and this image right here that I've been drawing, this is the cover for 1983. It's a dark little story about this girl and her family. And I apologize that I missed like kind of the coolest part, which was putting all this hair on the page, which was kind of fun, but plenty more to come. Apologies for the quality. I'm going to be fine-tuning all of this. I'm going to have actual lights. I got to spruce up the recording of the art. Basically, I'm going to be fine-tuning everything and figuring this out as I go along. So next time, I'm going to be talking about my creative goals for 2020, what I'm actually going to be working on, what I'll be drawing in these videos, so stay tuned for that. Other than that, I hope you enjoyed it. This is going to be a lot of fun. Like, comment, subscribe. I don't know what else. All the things. And I will see you soon. Stay spooky.
Stay spooky. Hey, spookies.
I'm gonna clean these glasses. What's up, dudes, dudettes, duderinos? Welcome back to Let's Make Comics. I am Stephen Emond. I'm one half of the Mighty Machine Corps, a new spooky comics publisher. I'm feeling good tonight. I've got my adult beverage here. It's adult because it's very mature to drink water. I feel like I've been planning this year for months now, and I'm so excited it's finally 2020 and I can start taking actions. Today's video is all about setting goals, and this is Let's Make Comics, so it's going to be tied into my goals for comics and goals that hopefully you can use too in terms of making comics or art or whatever kind of thing you're interested in. Now, this YouTube channel is literally only 2 days old. This is my second video, and as we know, when a child is 2 days old is when it needs the most affection. So if you could like and subscribe and maybe even comment if you get anything out of this video or if you find it entertaining at all. And if you don't find it entertaining and you don't get anything out of it, well then I'm just going to try next week again to win your heart, you stubborn scoundrel. I love you. Alright, tonight on Let's Make Comics, I'm going to be talking about setting goals. I'm going to talk specifically about my goals, all the things I want to do this year, how I plan to achieve those things. I'm going to tie it to comics. I'm going to tell you about my creative goals for this year. What am I doing with my hands? Hatching an evil plot, setting goals. That's what I want to talk about today. So it's a lot of asking yourself questions like, what do I want to do this year? And part of doing what I want to do this year is what am I going to do this month to get there? What am I going to do this week? What are my goals today? All in favor of getting to this end goal of what I want for the year. I'm a big planner. I'm a big outliner in my projects and my life. I like to make lists, sticky notes, planners, printout calendars. I used to write on my hands. I like to have what I'm doing written down and planned out. I like to have a purpose in the actions that I take. Even when I start a project, a lot of times I'm projecting all the way to the end. I like to picture the reviews, and I think like, okay, if I had a glowing review of this book that I'm setting out to write, what does it say? Are they saying, Iman delivered beautiful prose and something that really gets to your heart or whatever, that gives me some kind of guidance. Like, I want to get that review, so I'm going to write a book that's going to lead up to that. Generally for me, each year it involves publishing in some way. It involves doing a new book or doing a new comic book. Lately it's been, try to get this project off the ground, get this to a publisher, get this through my agent, my editor, and the acquisitions team, and get this into bookstores. Ideally getting published, getting the advance, earning out royalties, making money off of your art. This year I have a different goal for probably the first time in a long time, and it's a little scary and it's also exciting. I want to reestablish myself. My goals this year are to reestablish myself as an artist, to reestablish myself in comic books, to reestablish myself as a person and with my fan base, to grow my fan base, to communicate with my fans. Those are all my goals for this year. So even though I'll be working creatively and drawing and writing, my goal isn't to have my next book published by Macmillan or Little Brown Books for Young Readers or Image Comics or anything. I'm doing this completely on my own, pretty much outside of the publishing industry that I've been a part of for the past decade. Not really involving any editor or agent in this. This is kind of me just freewheeling out there on my own, trying to develop myself as an artist and as a person. I think it's fair to take a year and do that and kind of recenter yourself and figure out what it is exactly that you want to do. I do want to make art still, and I want to get it directly to an audience. I haven't had a book out since 2015, which was Bright Lights, Dark Nights. So that's, going on 5 years now. That's too long for me. I don't want to be taking 5 years in between projects anymore. Those 5 years were filled with a lot of almost projects, a lot of things that I started and didn't get published, projects that fell through. So there was a lot of disappointment wrapped up in there. So many things that I was passionate about that I wish I could have just put out and put in front of an audience and just see what happens. But sometimes publishing can be frustrating like that. I want to have something out there that people can read regularly. When I was doing Emo Boy back in 2005, 6, and 7, every other month I had a new book out, and that was really exciting. Like, I would spend a month working on a book and then a month with the book out there getting reviews and publicizing it, and there was a lot of activity constantly, and that was a really fun feeling. Whereas with traditional publishing, you spend a year, 2 years, 3 years working in silence on a book, and then all of a sudden it's out and you're going to conventions and reading appearances, and a month later you're back to quiet life and working on books by yourself. It's a very weird industry like that. So that's my goal this year. Part of setting goals is setting attainable goals, like making concrete things. So I want to grow my audience. I want to connect with my audience. I want to make myself more available. So how am I going to achieve those things? I can't just say I want to expand my fan base and, snap my fingers and it's done. Like, there's my goal for the year, I did it. I have to actually do something. I have to take some kind of action to achieve that goal. Part of it is doing this web series, doing this YouTube channel, Let's Make Comics. I'm going to be posting this weekly. This is a way for me to open up, talk about what I'm going through, talk about how these goals are going, open myself up to discussions, talk about these things, talk about making comics, talk about making art, all things that I love and enjoy. So this is something that's really fun for me. It's a work in progress. I have no idea how exactly this is going to go. I'm going to try to do this at least weekly, if not more than weekly. And it's going to be, I'm learning as I go. Figuring out lighting, figuring out recording equipment, how to make this sound okay, how to make it look okay. Try to get some kind of professionalism to it. This is my second video, so I'm learning. This is a process, but I hope you stick around and kind of watch this process. Watch the channel grow, watch the videos get better, ideally watch the fan base grow. And I'll also be updating you on other projects that I'm doing. I'll be going to comic book conventions this year as part of Machina Corps. We'll be using social media more. That's scary, that's a work in progress, but these are all steps that I'm taking. These are all things I did not do last year. Now, expanding my fan base is still kind of broad. It's a little too generic to be a really good goal. I mean, if 50 people follow me that didn't follow me at the beginning of the year, is that expanding my fan base? Do I want 50 more people, 100, 1,000, 1,000,000? I don't know. I just know that I have work to do here. I can feel it, and it's definitely something that I need to be doing. Another part of my goals for the year is I'm going to be doing a webcomic. I'm doing a horror comic called Have Heart. This is a project that's been kind of on my back burner for a long time. I did every few years for the past decade, I've tried another version of this story. My last big stab at it was in 2016. Right now feels like just the right time to do it, and to do it outside of the publishing area, I think kind of opens me up to relax and do the book that I want to do, as opposed to trying to fit it into something that might work in traditional publishing. So I'm not going to do a Kickstarter for the comic, or at least not yet, because I don't feel like I have the fan base and the connection to pull that off. I'm not going to go to any of my publishing contacts because I don't think that it's necessarily something traditional publishing would want to publish. I think it's weird and it's dark, but I feel like there is an audience for it, and webcomic is what it needs to be right now. I need to prove that there's an audience for it. I need to find that audience and have them see this comic. It's not, the book that the librarian's gonna suggest to the kids. It's not, a book that the schools are gonna stock. It's for art lovers, for weird kids, people into interesting stuff. It's cerebral and quirky, and hopefully it looks good. But more on that later. That's something that I'm gonna be continuing to develop these first couple months, and hopefully in the spring I'll be launching that. So that's a major goal for me. So I got the YouTube series, I've got conventions, I've got my webcomic. That's going to keep me pretty busy this year. So even when I have these different goals, there's still the question of making each one of these goals even more attainable. So I'm going to do a YouTube series every week. That doesn't just happen. That takes goals. So let's say I want to post these at, Saturday night. So Friday, I'm recording the introductions. Saturday, I'm recording this right now, this audio, to go over the art. Anytime during the week I'm doing art, I'm recording it so that I could put it into these Let's Make Comic videos. During the week, I'm planning out what I want to talk about, what I want to say. So if it's Wednesday and I don't have a good script yet, or not script, but, a list of things that I want to discuss, that's a goal that I need to reach. So let's say Wednesday and Thursday, I really need to finalize what I'm going to talk about. Friday, I'm going to introduce it and get all spruced up with my lighting and everything and record that. Saturday, I'm doing audio, editing Saturday evening. You have to have goals in place for what if I'm busy that weekend? What if I have plans and I'm not going to be able to do that? Maybe I need to stockpile. Maybe I need to do 2 videos at a time so I have one ready for when that happens. All things that you got to think about, that you got to write down, that you got to plan for. So time is rare, time is money. I work a full-time job, full disclosure, so any of these projects that I'm doing, working on comics, working on videos, preparing for conventions, that's all done after work hours when I'm beat and exhausted at the end of the day. Time is rare, energy is rare, so having those plans and those goals in place, like, okay, I know when I go home tonight, I'm gonna be beat, but if I can accomplish A, B, and C, I can relax the rest of the night. I know I'm on track for accomplishing my goals for this week. So a regular week for me could be posting Emo Boy every day, working on ideas and scripts for videos, finding as much time as I can to draw. I like to try to find at least once a week where I can go out for a couple hours to a cafe and just write. And writing for me doesn't necessarily mean, chapter 1, paragraph 1. Going out to write for me can be just organizing, planning out what I want to do, what I need to do, all these lists and things, thinking about social media, thinking about bigger long-term things, but also thinking, what am I going to be doing for this webcomic? How am I going to make this work? What needs to be done still? Doing sketches and all that stuff. So I like to have at least a couple hours a week that I could just think and organize and be clear. And meanwhile, while I'm at work, I've got my sticky notes everywhere. If something pops into my head, I'm jotting it down. I'm a big believer in writing things down. That's it for today. That's setting goals. That's my goals, my plans, my creative goals for the year. I'm going to talk a lot more about have heart and the long path that that's taken in the near future. I'm thinking of actually doing a kind of making of series on YouTube, showing all these sketches, the earlier versions, what's led up to this webcomic, and I'll talk plenty about what to expect, but it's really exciting. It's something I'm super passionate about. It's taking it as serious as any other project I've done. This is my big project for right now. This is what I'm doing, so stick around. Alright, so there it is. Lay out your wants. Be realistic. Look at your end game. Look at where you are now. How do you get from A to B? Make some concrete goals. I'm really into these printout calendars. You can just go onto like printable calendar on Google. I write down all the bills I have to pay, things I have to do, but I write down, daily goals, sticky notes, anything. Put it down on paper somewhere and hold yourself accountable. You can do it. Haunt that subscribe button, press like, send a comment. I'm not so famous that I won't respond yet. I've got at least a month before I get to that point, so now is the time to talk. Go out there, set some goals of your own, and as always,
Stay spooky.
Oh yeah, that's spooky. Hey spookies. I know it looks like I'm about to head out, but full disclosure, I'm just wearing this jacket to look cool. So in today's episode, I wanted to talk about something that people don't really talk about a lot, and that's failure. I was invited to this unicorn writers conference. It's not for unicorns, it's for writers. It was at a castle in New York, and it was really cool. The reason they asked me to come is because I was going to do a talk on illustrating in novels, because in Happy Face, Wintertown, all of my books, I tend to use art. I had the 3 examples to go off of, but I also had a long list of other projects that did not become books that I also used art in. So what followed was about an hour and a half of me listing off failure after failure after failure, all these different projects that I tried to get off the ground that all involved art. But the speech very well could have been called, the long list of Stephen Iman's failures. As far as I know, it's something that everybody goes through. I mean, it's possible that all these other authors that get on the bookshelves that always have different books coming out, different movie deals, it's possible everything they write turns to gold. I don't know. For me, not the case. I have a lot of things that I love, that I'm passionate about, that don't get off the ground, and people don't really talk about it. So let's talk about it. Alright, so today's video I wanted to talk about failures, creative failures. Although I think with every failure there's success, so it's definitely a dichotomy. If you have one, you have the other. I started doing artwork in an attempt to be published back in the late 90s. I did a comic strip for quite a few years called Steve Reno, and I did that for like 97, 98, 99, up into the early 2000s, pretty much until Emo Boy came out. Now, I never became a published, syndicated cartoonist, so you could say Steve Reno was my first major failure. But over those 5 years or so, I learned so much. I sent out so many different submissions to syndicates. I got to know editors there. I won some contests. My art developed. My writing developed. So in a lot of ways, you could say that was a success. Likewise with Emo Boy, sales kind of dwindled by the time I got to 12 issues. We couldn't publish it anymore, but I further established my writing, and out of that came my young adult career, and I got to write in the Emo Boy movie. After that, I was working in young adult novels, and I did Happy Face, I did Wintertown, but even that came with a lot of failures along the way. After I finished Happy Face, I wanted to do a science fiction novel. It's actually the earliest incarnation of the webcomic that I'm going to be doing really soon. And that was something that I spent a lot of time on. I was reading about quantum mechanic theory and figuring out the afterworld and trying to come up with a take on the Odyssey, And it was something that I was just spinning my wheels on. I was just doing all this research and all this writing, but I wasn't getting any further with my story. And eventually I had the idea for Wintertown when I saw the name Winter Haven, Florida. And I thought, Winter Haven, we should have a Winter Haven in Connecticut. We have winter here. It was that simple. So I ended up publishing my next book off of something that was literally a 2-second thought. Even when I did Bright Lights, Dark Nights as my third book, there was a good year or so that I was pushing a ghost story that took place in the woods. I was trying to do a young adult story about a band where all the members were in love with the same girl. And eventually Bright Lights, Dark Nights came out. We had that hook of, let's take a look at a interracial relationship for teenagers in the mid 2010s, and that was an interesting enough hook that we could kind of develop a full book around that. Now the years since Bright Lights, Dark Nights have been a little tougher. I spent a good year or so working on a Civil War themed young adult novel, even though my grandmother really wanted me to write this story. She had this newspaper article about her grandfather and how he was the youngest person to survive the entirety of the war, and it had this kind of romance to it, and he married his sweetie right after, and she thought it would be a good book to write. Now, I am not a good history student. I regularly failed history. It's one of those things where if you fail it one semester, it's kind of hard to catch up. Not my strong suit, so I never really wanted to do it, but I mentioned it to my editor and to my agent, and everybody was really interested in it. Now, what got me into that idea was, in my research, I came across the idea of these war sketchers, how photography was in its infancy at the time. You basically had this gigantic trailer that you had to take around with you just to take a picture. So they were still employing people to go out along with the armies into the war, and they would just kind of hide away and they would draw what they were seeing. And there's books of just this beautiful, beautiful art, and I was really excited about that. I wanted to draw these kind of Virginia landscapes and rolling clouds, and I spent a good year doing as much research as I could. I was reading everything about it. I was tracking exactly where my great-great-grandfather had gone. We sent it out, and my editor was like, it's clear that he doesn't really know this time period enough to write this story. It was extremely difficult. Almost every other sentence I had to look up, was this a thing in the 1860s? I tried doing something that was a spin-off of Bright Lights, Dark Nights, because I got so much nice fan mail about that and about how I wrote that Naomi character. So I tried creating something in that same world. It was more superhero oriented, but it was about a black female lead, and I think that was just too many jumps trying to write somebody a different race and a different sex of my own. I was working on a book about a traveling musician. He had this thing where he would fake kill himself at the end of every one of his shows. That one I tried putting out there, and I got feedback that, having a teen protagonist that doesn't live at home or have a regular school or whatever wasn't identifiable enough. So that was something that I worked on for a while, just to kind of come up with a dead end on that. And it's tough because when you spend a few months working on something and you invest so much of yourself and you take things from your life and you fall in love with these characters, just to kind of get this, no, we're not going to publish that, or I don't think this is the one, Steve. Maybe keep trying. It's very difficult, but with time and space, you look back on it and you go, yeah, maybe I shouldn't have been working on that, or, yeah, maybe I could have done that different. Most of the times, current me can respect that decision and say, yeah, there's probably a reason why that one didn't work out. The thing is, though, is that even when I spend a year working on something and it doesn't happen, it's not for nothing. That thing I was working on in 2010, that really kind of bloated sci-fi epic involving, how to use quantum mechanic theory to get into an afterlife. Eventually I thought maybe it's not a science fiction story, maybe it's a ghost story. Maybe it's a much more supernatural abstract way of getting from A to B. Maybe it's not something I need to do all of this crazy research and science to accomplish. A lot of the work that I do, even if it doesn't happen right then, could happen later. And sometimes you start a couple different projects and then you put them together and you think, oh, this is the missing puzzle piece. This is what I needed. I just wasn't ready to write it at that time. And so there's gonna be perceived failures, but there's gonna be successes. And a lot of times they're successes that maybe you didn't plan on and they just happen. When I did Bright Lights, Dark Nights, it was originally going to be about bullies and about comic books, and it was going to have this entire comic book motif, and it was going to look like a Spider-Man comic from the 1960s, and it just happened to have an interracial romance in it. In that process, we kind of decided there's two stories being told here, and one of them is a lot more interesting than the other, which doesn't mean that all that comic book stuff that I was really kind of geeking out about and looking forward to doing won't happen. That's probably just a different project that I haven't gotten to yet. Just because something doesn't work right now doesn't mean it'll never work. Just learn from it, use it as an experience. I think I've gained something from every one of these projects that I worked on, whether they got published or not. So a lot of this stuff that I've done, really nobody has seen, but I kind of consider them all part of my story in publishing and in my creative life. You are not your failures. You are not your rejections. You are not your quitting. You are not your unfinished projects. Those are just steps on your journey. That's not your story. That's not the end. It's just part of the process. And it's something, as far as I know, everybody goes through. So learn from it, hold your head up high, move on, hit the like button, subscribe to the videos, and leave a comment. Why not? Let's talk about your failures. And next week I want to talk about writing horror, spooky stories. That's what I'm really into right now, and I'm excited to get into it. Stay tuned and stay spooky.
Stay spooky. Horror.
What, zombies, blood and guts, devil worshipping? Ugh, who even watches that? Jump scares. Ghosts freak me out.
Why?
What's up, spookies? So many things I love I feel like I need to defend all the time. Comic books, professional wrestling, cartoons, schmaltzy 70s and 80s adult contemporary music, and horror. Why watch horror? Why write horror? What kind of sick mind even thinks this stuff up?
I do.
Ready? Defense of the genre in 3, 2, 1. There's something fascinating about the horror genre. Like, this is something we shouldn't be seeing. There's a little thrill to horror. It's a little voyeuristic, kind of edgy, a little naughty. Even as a kid, I enjoyed it. I loved Nightmare on Elm Street. I watched that when I was probably too young to be watching it. And I remember I would draw Freddy Krueger's face and I would tape it to the mirror, thinking somebody would look in the mirror and be scared out of their mind by this terrible little kid drawing of Freddy Krueger. And the weird thing is I was a scared kid. I was very scared of everything. I was paranoid that if goodnight wasn't the last thing I said, something terrible would happen to my parents. I thought there were monsters outside of these giant windows we had in my living room. I was afraid to look outside the window because we had a street light just on the corner, and I always imagined this Grim Reaper just standing there staring at me, so I was a pretty scared kid. I always thought my house was haunted. I thought lights went on when they should have been off. Even as an adult, I'm still kind of a scaredy cat. I'm afraid of ghosts. I have a weird thing about mirrors, especially at night. I don't want to look at them just in case there's something behind me that's not supposed to be there. But oddly enough, I still kind of seek this stuff out. I enjoy that feeling of being scared. I think movies and books and games They're all about kind of forcing that emotion. We go seek out something because we want to feel a certain way. Some people love dramas. They love to see a movie that they know they're going to cry at and they need to bring their Kleenex to. Some people enjoy comedies because they want to laugh. They want something that's going to make them feel great. Yearning, sadness, laughter, and fear. A good scare makes you feel alive, and we want that shot of adrenaline, that excitement, that rush that we get from a good shock to the system. We want that disturbing image stuck in our heads. The red door in The Haunting of Hill House, or the bear suit at the end of Midsummer, the neighbor's apartment at the end of Rosemary's Baby. We want to see these weird things that we kind of ask ourselves, how did I get there? What am I looking at right now? This is really disturbing and strange, but it's somehow enticing too. I've developed a few projects before that kind of dabbed into scary territory, nothing I've really published, and this will be my first real stab at full-on horror, this webcomic that I'm doing. I want to fill it with that sense of, wow, this is a little off. Recognizably human, but strange. A little off-kilter, that sense of dread and foreboding. Just that touch of evilness. People try real hard to kind of bury that sense of evilness down. Some people don't want to acknowledge that it exists, and they spend a lifetime trying to erase any hint of it. But we're all a mixed bag, right? We're happy, we're sad, we like certain things, we hate certain things. It's just part of human emotion. It's part of that spectrum of being a human being. To pretend we're 100% positive all the time is a lie. And I think there's a little perverse satisfaction in seeing the id displayed on screen or on paper. To see somebody acknowledge these kind of dark thoughts that we don't want to acknowledge exist. Art is the perfect place to let that stuff out. The brand of horror I'm interested in is a very human horror. Like, I'm planning this as I would any full literary novel, with well-rounded characters, with a full scale of emotions, and just that bonus of otherworldly influence. I want to create that sense of, what am I reading right now? What am I looking at? I want to get that sense of, that's something I've never seen before. Or that's a thought I've never had. I think, who is this person that's thought of that weird, strange thing is the ultimate compliment when you're working in horror. Like a great character study that can get deeper into the character by making the abstract and the emotional real and physical and terrifying. Taking that inner world of a character and pulling it into the outer world and painting your entire scene with these emotions and these abstract feelings. Have you ever woken up from a nightmare and you can't get rid of that feeling? Like it lasts with you through the morning and you're in this spacey fog and you're still kind of just half in this dream state. You can still feel the teeth tumbling around in your mouth and falling out of it. Fear is such an arrow right to the heart and right to the brain. The frightening can bypass that BS detector that a lot of us have. If you can scare somebody, you shut out the cynic. They believe. If you do it right and you make something scary and unsettling, then the proof is in the pudding. I remember staying up until 4 a.m. when I was finishing Stephen King's The Dark Tower. I had spent months reading these books, 7 books, and I finally got to the last one. And the entire time you're wondering what's in the friggin' tower. Roland and his quartet spend 7 books trying to get to this tower, and that's where all the answers are. And you finally get there, and he's going up those stairs, and it's the last pages, and it's so haunting and creepy, and it's just him. He's all by himself. He's lost all of his friends and family and followers, and it's just him in this tower going up the stairs. And I honestly can't say it's the greatest ending in the world, but it was deeply unsettling to the point that I stayed up until 4 a.m. on a work night and couldn't sleep. And I remember spending the next day just thinking about that tower and being completely haunted by it. I want to write that kind of thing. I want to make those images like Junji Ito. Images that are so unique and disturbing that they just kind of burn a little place into your brain and sit there for a while. I'm excited. I want to take off the gloves. I want to get weird. I want to let loose. I want to be creative. I want to make something certainly that nobody's ever seen me make before. And they say, oh, I didn't know you had that in them. That's different. I want to write a story that you can't look away from. I want to create a world that you just need to explore. And every time you turn the page, you wonder, am I going to see something as weird on this page as I saw on the last one? And if I can pull that off, I think I will have written something that's truly undeniable. And horror, as much as anything, gives you the chance to write something that's emotional and impactful and chock full of meaning and symbolism that can really infest itself into the brain and create something that's never been there before. It's an exciting challenge, and I can't wait to see what I create. So some last thoughts on the subject. I think horror as a genre, as a form of art, is important. I think it's important that we release that id, that we acknowledge that darker side. I think it's okay to have fun with that. I think it's important for teenagers to go through that phase where they discover the weird stuff and the darker side of art. I think there's a lot of acknowledgement and relief in finding those things and going, okay, I'm not the only person that's into this stuff. There's a whole culture out there. And I think it's important to acknowledge that and not bury it. Now, it's okay to say, these things scare me and I don't like being scared. I mean, that's perfectly fine. And everybody has their own tastes. Person into the Julia Roberts romantic comedy, to completely date myself, may not be into Hellraiser, but it's a perfectly valid art form and a great one that I've always found a lot of enjoyment in, a lot of creativity that you just don't find anywhere else. So embrace horror and cheers to the sick minds. Horror is awesome. If I meet somebody and I find out they're into horror movies, I know that that's an interesting and cool person and we're going to get along. Yes, normal, everyday, well-balanced people love horror. They love scary movies. Sickos and weirdos love horror movies too, and you know what? They're awesome also. Everyone rolling their eyes at horror needs to get over themselves. All my fellow creators and writers, go out there, make your sickest, weirdest, darkest stuff, okay? I want to read it. Other people do too. Make it weird, make it dark, like, comment, subscribe. All those things help me. I'm trying to grow my channel through the year. This is a process. This is my third video. I'm going to keep doing these every week. Really looking for growth. So if you enjoyed this, spread the word. I really appreciate it. Definitely need word of mouth. And next week, I think I'm going to talk about structure, which is something that was lacking for me when I was working on Happy Face and the Emo Boy movie back in 2008. Everything was structure. I learned a lot and I'm going to pass that on next week. So make sure you subscribe. And as always, keep it spooky.
And as always, keep it spooky.
Hey, spookies.
Hey, spookies.
Hey, spookies.
Hi, spookies.
So I had an idea for Let's Make Comics to record a conversation with the other half of Machina Corp's, Chandra.
Hi.
We're both artists. We both make comic books. We're both in publishing. I thought it would be great to sit down and talk about our careers and how we got into comics, our favorites and tools of the trade, and all the interesting stuff that you would want to see on Let's Make Comics. And I did it. I recorded the conversation. It went 1 full hour and it was amazing.
It was magical.
But I forgot to plug in the microphone. So we talked for an hour. The microphone picked up none of it, but my iMac was recording. You can hear it, you can tell what we're saying. It's not as crystal clear as I would love. It was a frustrating experience, but I think it's not lost. We're going to present it here anyways, with the caveat that the audio is not as pristine as we would have liked. All right, Chandra, thank you for joining me.
You're welcome.
This is Let's Make Comics.
Oh, is it?
It is, and you and I both make comics, so thank you for being part of this video, and I'm just going to pick your brain and ideally have a conversation with you about comics for any of our viewers that would like to make their own comics or be part of the comics industry. You and I are both professionals.
So I've been told.
So you've been told. And so real quick, I just wanted to start off talking about early Chan and Steve days.
Okay.
Because I did Emo Boy, and I was doing a comic with Slave Labor Graphics. And I pretty much knew you from the internet.
Yes.
And you were on DeviantArt and
LiveJournal.
LiveJournal.
Yeah.
I don't remember a lot of LiveJournal, but I remember DeviantArt for sure.
Yeah.
I remember doing LiveJournal. And then I saw you at, I think, New York Comic Con, probably like 2007.
2007. I'm getting pretty certain on this.
Yeah, because I was selling Emo Boy, and that would make sense because that's when I met Connie and kind of transitioned into doing young adult novels. But I just wanted to bring this up because we had a stupid conversation that's still funny to this day to me and leads into the artwork that you did for Emo Boy. So we were discussing the potential in comics for
making money.
Making that Sandman money. And we wanted to do... I was probably commenting on your spooky Chan persona and the gothiness, because I was saying I wanted to do what Neil Gaiman and Sandman had done for goths, but for furries. And we thought we could make like that one furry comic. I have a cat scratching. That we can make that one furry comic that would be like a really good story and a great character and well told, and it would like really just be something all the furries of the world would gravitate to.
Mind you, this was only probably an under 5-minute conversation.
Yeah. And we never forgot it because it was that good and important.
Well, also, when I got you to sign Emo Boy #1, I think it is, you put in a little inscription inside saying, "To Furry Chan." Think about it, eh?
Right. Because there are lots of furries in the world, and they don't have the iconic character to make theirs. I mean, they probably do, but they could use a bigger one, I think.
So, this is our big, becoming friends, because we had been friends online previously.
Yeah, and I asked you to do a pinup as in the early
Actually,
days.
Did you ask me to do a pinup, or did I just...
No, I'm pretty sure I asked you, because in those early days, I was very bold, and anybody I liked as an artist, I would just write them and go, "Hey, I have a published comic," and went to my head like I thought I was a real huge big shot. I wrote to Becky Cloonan, and I was like, "Hey, would you like to do a guest pinup? Everybody's doing them," and she's like, "You know, I kid." She kind of told me off. Nothing against her. I probably approached her totally wrong. Or something.
She's amazing. No offense to her whatsoever.
I think I said something. I was like, "Wow, it's really cool that you have all these followers and stuff." She's like, "Yeah, I worked my ass off to get those followers." I was like, "Oh God!" But most people I would approach would be like, "Sure, I'll do a pinup," and that's why I have a lot of cool pinups. But you did Emo Furry or Furry Boy.
Yeah. He's dressed up as a bunny.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I was reading some of the comments under that not too long ago, and somebody gave me shit for making him a furry, and he's like, "That's not very emo." I don't understand. It's not emo. I'm like, whoa. And then me at the time didn't give a fuck. I just fought that guy.
literally. You said, listen, we're meeting by the tree, 3 o'clock.
8. But no, so during that New York Comic Con, I was actually pitching the God Machine. And I had pitched to SLG.
Hold on, we're going to get to that.
Oh, okay.
You're skipping ahead.
I'm skipping ahead, but I'm...
We're starting there. That's like the...
Our origin story.
That's the prologue, but we're actually going to go back in time before we come back to this moment. Yeah, some amazing storytelling going on here. So I wanted to ask you, did you ever have a moment as a wee tiny Chan that I want to do that moment where you're not just going, I like cartoons, I like video games, but like, did you have a moment, some specific thing that made you think, like, I want to do that, I want to make these things?
So early on, I already knew that I wanted to do like something in the arts because it was just my calling. I wanted to do animation, to be exact. It wasn't until I was watching those Disney specials on how they make things that I couldn't just become a character designer. I couldn't be the one who told stories. I couldn't be the one to do the in-between animation. Not in-between, but the key animation. You have to work up doing in-between animation and work from that. And I knew, like, I didn't want to do that. I didn't want to put that work in. For whatever reason, I just wanted to tell stories. And it dawned on me that comics were that, and I wasn't quite certain that I was going to do comics as a living. I just knew art had to be in my wheelhouse of doing something with my life. It wasn't until like high school when I finally decided, it's like, well, damn, I want to do comics. It was that kind of like, I saw like indie comics, Jonan Vasquez in particular.
But like, so... Alright, so Jonan, by then you're already a teenager.
By then I'm already a teenager, but that's when I knew I wanted to do comics.
Like, I know when I was a kid,
yeah,
I remember, like, my brother was the comic book person. I wasn't so much, but he had this issue. It was a G.I. Joe issue, and it was, like, a special that was, like, all the characters. It was like a G.I. Joe encyclopedia, and it'd be like Snake Eyes on one page and Storm on one page. And I remember seeing all the different characters and being like, I want to make up some. I want to have like new pages that are my characters and my people that I add in there. But I totally know what you mean about the Disney specials, because I remember seeing like The Lion King, and they're like painting the background. You see the giant paintings, and always the videos of them going to look at the lions and drawing the lions and all that, and it just seemed like the funnest job in the world.
Oh yeah, especially with concept art and stuff like that. I have a question for you.
Okay.
Did your brother ever do artwork?
No.
He did not?
No, not at all.
Did anybody in your life do artwork growing up?
Yeah, well, so my dad would swear that he was the artist of the family, and I remember it would always be like, you get that from me, you get that from my side of the family. My dad could draw anything and it would look like a photograph. You should see me draw sometimes. He was kind of a braggart, but in theory there may have been some artistic talent there. My uncle, my dad's brother, was not an artist, but his wife, who's not blood related,
right,
would do, she kind of took an interest in my art making, and she actually, like, for the job that she did, she would take, like, she'd do these renderings, these incredibly realistic renderings for, like, magazines of products and stuff, which, like, she was a really talented artist. And I remember she did, like, a painting of my cousin Joey that was always hanging up in their house. And like, as an adult, I wish like I could have conversations with, like, I'm kind of separated from that side of the family. But yeah, like as a kid, it was just like, wow, she's a cool artist. I also like to draw. And, you know, we didn't really have too much of a connection beyond like that. But as an adult, I'm like, man, that's cool. I would like to know more about that stuff that she did.
Right. But would you say that was an influence to you at all, or was it just a coincidence in a way?
No, I mean, there's more of a coincidence. The artistic side of myself really just kind of came from me. I mean, I've always felt a need to express things visually. Like as a kid, I remember one of the things I would always draw is my grandparents would take me and my brother to the movies. And like we do these sleepovers when we go to the movies. And then we go back, and I would immediately need to just start drawing everything I could remember from the movie. Like, not good. Which is, let me ask you this. I think we've talked about this, but my entire life, I've always been like, wow, he's such a cool artist, and he could draw anything. And they were not good drawings. If you look back on them, they were atrocious, but everybody always acted as if they were the greatest drawings ever made. And I see kids now that are actually drawing the greatest drawings ever made. And I'm like, oh my God, if that person was next to me, I'd be like laughed out of this school for my artistic prowess. But for whatever reason, like people were very encouraging of my young art.
Me too. I mean, like, art was always a part of my life. I don't remember any part of my life where I wasn't drawing or creating or whatever. And my mom was very encouraging. She gave me like crayons and paper, and then like we moved on from that, you know, pencils, colored pencils, etc., etc. And you know, I think of my artwork growing up, and I haven't looked at it since. But I think I was really good.
Some of it is on your DeviantArt.
No.
we have both looked at your art since.
No, I mean like as a kid.
Mm-hmm.
Like I think
kid.
Yeah, like elementary school. I was really, really good. My little braggy story is in third grade, I won out against the fourth and fifth graders for an art scholarship to get like extra courses outside of school.
I have something like that. I think so. In our school, it was called like the Scholastic Program or like the Scholastic Key or something.
Yeah.
And I actually also won that, but you had to go away for a couple weeks, and I was such a sheltered child that I couldn't leave, so I just turned it down.
Oh, that's awful. Mine was actually, it happened every Wednesday.
Wednesday?
Yeah, every Wednesday I'd go to a course after school.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so
every Wednesday you had a contest that you would win.
Oh, no, well, yeah, I'm just that good. No.
And once again, for the 46th consecutive week, your winner is...
me.
Step aside, kids. What was I going to say? You mentioned... Shoot, I want to backtrack for 1 second. Mentioned, let's see here, there was the... One more thing... So my weird similar thing is, so I was not a popular kid in middle school. I was like severely bullied to the point that I would probably say I was the least popular kid in my entire school. And like, so people would make fun of me, push me around, call me names. I had to sit by myself. Like, it was really bad. And then, like, you know how they have the year-end award ceremony or whatever?
Mm-hmm.
They had, like, and the most artistic is Stephen Emond. And I was like, oh, God, I'm going to have to get up and walk to the front of the gym. And I was so, like, embarrassed and humiliated.
When was this? What grade?
Maybe 7th grade.
Okay.
It's like middle school.
Yeah.
And everybody just erupted in applause, and they were just cheering and screaming my name. And I was like, you people hate me. Why are you cheering? Like, you should be throwing stuff at me based on the way you treat me every day. And
it's like some weird, like, dream scenario that happens. Like, all the awful people actually like you at the moment of your, like, Da-da! Guess what? I am the best artist.
I know. And then the next day, we were back to normal. It did not last.
So weird. It's very weird. Phew.
So you were mentioning getting into Jonin and I Feel Sick. I wanted to ask you another question.
Sure.
So this is kind of a two-parter. First off, I'm a little envious, or maybe not envious, I'm not sure, but you've always had this kind of... So we both have a laser focus in terms of goals from a young age.
Yeah.
We've talked about this a little bit. Like, I think we are blessed and lucky to know from such an early age what we want to do and to have a goal that every day you're kind of working towards,
Right.
you know, through school, through college, through now, you know what it is you want out of life. And a lot of people I feel they don't have that aim. There are people that I know that are jealous that, not that I became an author or an artist, but that I've always known what I want to do and what I want to be. And a lot of people don't have that. They have their friendships and they have their family and they have their job, but they don't have that like creative passion that fills up all those dead, empty holes. So we both always had that, which is nice. And you've always especially had a laser focus in terms of aesthetic and kind of, I don't know, I guess what I wanted to ask was, I know The God Machine was your first like major published book and everything, and you were pitching it and you were putting it on DeviantArt for as long as I've known you. Like, was there ever something like a precursor to The God Machine? Were there other projects that you like got to the point that you were pitching, that you were really seriously working on?
So the weird thing is, I mean, I was working on a comic in high school, actually middle school to high school, that was my own pet project, and I never even dreamed of pitching it.
Okay.
God Machine is literally the first book I ever pitched. And it's something that came out of that last year of high school, and it just kind of bubbled up and like developed, as I was going through my 20s and whatnot. But I would create comic series with my cousin when we were younger. And we just had the need to tell stories, whether it was our fan fiction or our own original characters that we were creating. And I did something that was an anthropomorphized series called Brandy the Star Child. It's a very heavily like anime, Sailor Moon inspired shoujo magical girl thing.
Oh, you know, I kind of want you to do like a current day. Like, when's the last time you drew Brandy the Star Child?
Not too. I mean, like, I draw my one character, Kawaii. Yes, I know what it means. I knew what it meant when I named her, but it was before the phase of everyone's like, Kawaii desu ne. No, fuck that. I was just trying to be clever with my Japanese dictionary.
Have I seen it?
I don't know, like, they're a little bit hard to find. I think I might have some samples of Brandy on DeviantArt.
I know you do, but have you, like, I don't know, I guess I want to see, like, current modern day, like,
oh, yeah.
as if you were just
I could spit it out, yeah.
So the conversation went long. It went about an hour. We're going to do part 2 next week. We're going to get into publishing, self-publishing, all kinds of great stuff, licensed work. It's a great conversation. Stay tuned for next week.
Stay spooky.
That's kind of my thing. I do those.
Hey, Spookies.
It's me, Chandra Free, the other half of Machina Corpse. In case you missed it, Steve forgot to plug in the microphone for a conversation. Who does that? Steve does. That's why we put him in the corner. So here's part 2. We continue our conversation about how we got into comics. I really had fun doing this and taking over for a little bit. Enjoy the second half. The second half of part 2. Sorry, I'm terrible at those. Enjoy the second half of my conversation with Steve.
I think when I did, like my high school thing was the Steve Areno comic, which is like a comic strip, like a syndicated comic strip. And I started that like as I was graduating, and it was something I drew to keep in touch with all of my classmates. And I actually did a big book of comics that like we gave out at graduation. Actually, you go further back, I did this big poster of literally every kid in my school.
Wow.
That was handed out at like the graduation or whatever.
Oh my god, that's intense.
But I did this comic strip for like 3 or 4 years, and that was kind of my like. I always think of it as art boot camp or comics boot camp because every single issue I did, I was trying to improve it in some way, like whether it was changing the art style. Eventually I started working at a larger size and shrinking things down. I was getting cleaner and tighter. I was lettering bigger. I was actually sending these out to syndicates regularly.
Yeah.
And at first I would just get foreign letter rejection. And then they'd be like, oh, this kid just keeps on doing it. Like, try changing the premise, letter larger. And then I'd do those things. And I'd send it out again, and then I started working with a brush, and basically month by month, I was learning to write better and draw better, and it was a big development phase for me that led to Emo Boy.
So the difference between you and I, you seem to be able to master the technical a lot better than I. You're more focused on like, well, let me do this, let me enlarge the text, etc. Like according to like people giving you input, but you're always, even now, learning and progressing into different ways of doing things and experimentation. Me, I've always just been very hyper focused on like style and being very. I don't know if sloppy is a good word, but expressive, perhaps. And it's not a diss or anything like that, because I really admire your technical handling of comics and illustration and all the little things. I think that's really to be commended. And for me, I do things in abstractions, and I just kind of like do it at the seat of my pants. Like, oh, you want some irregular like panels? Of course. I know how to do that in my sleep because I hate being technical. Now, I don't know if this works out for everybody, if they used a freewheeling kind of style. I mean, sometimes I do bring in technical things.
Well, my favorite stuff of yours is, like, I keep encouraging you to do more and more of it, is the more out there, when you start just throwing, I mean, you work digitally, we're going to get into this too, but when you start just throwing little chan magic, I call it, when you have little sparkles and paint splatters and designs and weird stuff, and it's more... we're going to get into this too. It's more of a fine art versus just drawing what's there. Or maybe, I don't know if fine art is the right word, but it's more of a painting. It's more emotional bloodletting or something.
Right. I mean, like, that comes from my background. My area of focus in college was fine art. Painting was one of the big things I did, and like actual like life studies, anatomy and stuff like that. And so that puts a big influence on where I'm at now, is that I take that fine art aesthetic and I put that in. And so sometimes I fight with some of the urges to be like my contemporaries, which is like, oh, do inking, do this, do it like that. Where all I want to do is just like scribble and fuck things up, I guess you could say, like add splashes of color everywhere and
you got to do you, because you're the chanster, and there's only one chance there. But let me ask you this: so I've seen your traditional work and your digital work. Let me ask 3 questions.
Okay.
Which feels better to you? Which do you prefer to do? Traditional painting and drawing, pencils, on paper, or working on your iPad?
It depends. I really don't have a preference because to me, both of them are different worlds, but can also be the same world. I love doing my paintings, but that's what I call my fine art, my time to just do abstractions and just keep on putting paint on the canvas and do whatever is in my head without any planning, just going at it. And when it comes to comics, sometimes it can be a combination of traditional and digital.
Well, the God Machine, you did both. Like,
Right.
we've gone through the God Machine page by page, and you've been like, this one I drew on paper, this one I drew right into the iPad, and this one I painted first. And
Right. Well, not the iPad, of course, for anyone who's
okay.
following along.
That's true.
No.
You had the earliest iPad.
I did. So the God Machine is a mix of all of that from mostly a lot of the pages are penciled and then brought into Photoshop and digitally painted with I think it was an Intuos tablet.
I can see the difference when you point them out. When you go, this page was done completely digitally. I could see it's a little different, but if you didn't tell me that and I just read the book straight through, I wouldn't know.
Yeah, I'm pretty good about that.
What's easier for you, do you think?
Like in terms of like digital or traditional?
Yeah, like let's say you were going to draw a comic page right now, and I know you've pretty much been doing your comic pages lately on iPad. Would it be easier for you to think to just, well, alright, to be fair, you're still doing both, because you'll draw it in your sketchbook and you'll take a picture of it and then work digitally over that.
Right.
You got a whole process going.
So it always, I'm such a weirdo in the fact that I need certain things to happen a certain way. With Lonely BK right now, sometimes I'll take my thumbnails that I've sketched traditionally in my sketchbook, take a picture of it with my iPad and just bring that into Procreate and then do actual lines on top of it. Or I won't even do that at all. I mean, like, it's so bizarre, like, my process. But Lonely BK is completely digital. But if I were to, say, sit down and do God Machine, it would be thumbnail, traditional, probably pencils, and then scan, and then bring it into... I'm not sure at this point.
I feel like just knowing that's how you created the first volume, like I've told you, I think it's one of the most just beautiful books to look at. Like, if you haven't read the hardcover of The God Machine, find it, because it's a work of art, and it's just page by page, it's just beautiful.
Right.
And there's a part of me that goes, oh, that's how you did that? That's how you should do it going forward.
And if you can't find it, the plan is this, that we're going to republish it through Machina Corps.
Yes.
So, and that's going to have new content and new fleshed out things that were like scenes that didn't have enough love, and also new covers, new all sorts of things.
If there's anybody that hasn't seen this, you want to give a quick rundown of what the God Machine is, I'll give you 20 seconds.
Okay, so The God Machine is a story about a young man who's going through a really difficult time. His girlfriend's dead, and he can't quite make heads or tails of his life. He's starting to see monsters and things, and, it's all weird. But then, one night, a mysterious man comes to him, tells him that his girlfriend is still alive, floating in and out of the dream worlds, and he is the only one who can go and save her. Gods, monsters, teen angst, humor, it's got it all.
I feel like you've done this pitch before.
What makes you say that? I kind of fucked it up.
when I went to the Comic-Con, I went to a couple of Comic-Cons for Emo Boy, and I did, like, when I went there, I had no idea what I was doing, and by the time, like, the first day was over, somebody would come over, they'd look at it, and I'd be like, have you heard of Emo Boy? No, I haven't heard of Emo Boy. Oh, he's like an emotional Superman. Like, think of Superman, except if his superpowers were completely useless and destructive, and they caused everybody to hate him constantly. Like, I had this little spiel down, and I would figure, like, I'd get people to laugh, and, like, one by one, like, you learn, like, okay, say this and they're intrigued, say this and they laugh, say
Oh, yeah.
this and they're interested.
Now, that was the thing, like, when I was coming up with the elevator pitch, I was probably at San Diego or whatever.
Imagine the person who pitched the first elevator. Where were we?
So when I was learning the pitch for God Machine, I would say Satan comes to Guy and tells him that his girlfriend's still alive and now in the dream worlds, blah, blah, blah. And sometimes people seem to get really uncomfortable. I'm like,
Lord!
yeah, it's like, clutch my pearls.
Get me away from this spooky child!
What's wrong with it? And it's like, and I decided that I didn't want it to take on a religious overtone in my pitch. I wanted them to discover it for themselves. I mean, the book is called The God Machine.
Yeah, that's true. It's kind of built in.
But I kind of wanted, like, maybe Satan needs to be, like, kind of hidden a little bit, and they'll figure it out. And
That's totally his style.
But I mean, like, you learn these things as you go to conventions, and plus it's always, like, for any of you who are looking to pitch a book to fellow creators and editors, and also if you already have your book ready and you're going to conventions, have a pitch. Figure out your 20-second little thingamajigger.
Right. Write that down.
And really figure out, boil it down to the essence of, like, what would make people read this? And my hook was, well, the girl's dead, but she might be alive and she's in dream worlds.
I think having something like sitting at a convention table and one by one watching people walk away, you're learning real fast how to get them to stay, how to get them to laugh, how to intrigue them. Like,
Right.
that was a really good little school right there.
I mean, like, well, first of all, that's, like, really hard, no matter what, because there's a lot of do's and don'ts of conventions.
There's the hard sellers that
Yeah.
are like, hey, you, get over here. And it's like, no. Like, that's the worst thing you can do.
Right. Well, there's also, like, so one of the things that you're supposed to do is put the book in customers' hands. So they're forced to look at things.
Getting started on that.
Oh, I've done it a few times, but I never feel comfortable enough with it. It's really hard. But that is a do of conventions.
Yeah. If you're good at that, you should stand around Times Square in a mascot outfit.
Oh, no. Okay. Bringing some dark stuff out here.
Yeah, I've had some bad experiences with aggressive sellers.
All right, let's continue.
All right, so writing.
Woo.
Yeah, so I know from talking to you, so there's been one volume of The God Machine published.
Yeah.
And I've heard you basically rattle off a plot that's about 13 volumes long. And this isn't just over the course of 13 volumes. The God Machine's about this. It's literally, and then in volume 7, this happens, and this happens, and this happens. So I wanted to ask you, I know I'm a big planner and organizer. I outline extensively. Some people just feel the story out and they just go through the story and they experience it. And to me, that's terrifying. Like, I hope this ends somewhere that makes some kind of sense. And other people swear by that and they hate the outline because they feel like if they know the whole story, it's boring to write. I know you've obviously plotted a ton, but what's your plotting method?
So, it's really bizarre because this particular book series, The God Machine, has come about in different stages of my life of how I planned it, how I figured it out. One of my tried and true ways of doing it, and this is, I feel weird about it, but I go through the story through my head for a period of months, just working out new little things and figuring out how to get to the ending.
I couldn't tell if you even had it written down. That's like the Notorious B.I.G. will write, and it would when he was alive, write an entire song in his head, and then he'd just walk over to the microphone. He wouldn't write anything down. He would just store it in his head.
So a lot of it's in my head, and they always say, don't do that. And I'm also going to say, don't do that, because you'll forget. However, one of my things is that I modify and change and keep things interesting for myself as I'm getting older and whatnot. Also, I have written down a lot of the plot lines in Google Docs of like where everything is for each volume to hit those marks now. Like, it's pretty solidified, but it's still pretty loose.
Will you sit there and follow like a 3-act structure and be like, okay, this is the beginning, this is where it ends. I know in the middle it's got to go here. Each chapter has to hit these marks. Because I get like extensively, you've seen my writing process.
Yeah.
I get extensively detailed with all that.
So I like to call myself a storyteller and not a writer. Though I write, but I think I'm not good technical. I'm not good at coming up with that 3-act structure and whatnot. What I'm good at is this intuitive kind of like from one moment to the next. And it's kind of scary because I don't have the structure, but I do understand, like, say, a hero's journey and kind of the concept behind that of like those kind of story beats.
A lot of it is instinctual too. Like when I did Emo Boy, I've been going through posting Emo Boy on Webtoon, and so I've been rereading it. I don't tend to reread my stuff, so a lot of this I'm reading for the first time in like decades, and a lot of it holds up. But I didn't really start studying structure and outlining and writing until I was working on the movie.
Right.
At that point, it was just from having spent my life taking in movies and TV shows and comic books. You inherit a lot of how a story's supposed to look. You kind of know, okay, it's got to come together in the end. It's got to have a big swerve somewhere in there. You just do it. Can I leave the shame corner yet?
Nah. Let's stay there.
Hey, Spookies. Welcome to part 3 of Exhumed, a terrifying, bone-chilling, spine-cracking conversation with Spooky Chan herself, Chandra Free. This last part goes a little over 20 minutes and was a really fun conversation. I'm glad we got all 3 videos out. Hopefully you learned something either about the industry, about comic books, about Chandra, about myself. There's just so much that we covered in that hour. I'm hoping everybody finds something in there that they can relate to or that made 3 videos worthwhile. Check out our work. Find God Machine if you can find it. If not, we're going to be publishing it later this year under the Machina Corpse banner. It's really incredible and I can't say enough good things about it. Later this year we'll be talking at length about all things God Machine. This one's a little long but super fascinating, so sit back, enjoy some Garfield art, and enjoy Exhumed Part 3, a conversation with Chandra Free.
See, if I was writing a shorter format story, I would actually probably break it down a little bit more concisely. Concisely?
Mm-hmm.
That's a word.
Sounds right.
Okay. So I would do things differently, but since God Machine is like this weird sweeping epic, it's not exactly planned that way. But I've also planned, like, I've come up with lore behind a lot of the characters that we don't even get to learn until later, and I'm now going to put that in. But I have, like, a God Machine Bible of, like, before this happens, and these are characters that have persisted for all these years, and blah, blah, blah. It's, it makes the world richer and weirder, and I think, like, as I write that stuff, I want to put that in. I'm going to figure out how to incorporate it and just keep it fresh and keep it going. And
yeah, when I worked on Happy Face, I had like like the protagonist love interest is this girl Gretchen, and she's kind of mysterious, and you don't really understand why she's kind of up and down and this way and that way. And I had this entire backstory that was going to be part of the book, but my editor thought it was actually such a strong backstory that it almost felt like its own book, and she thought it was going to overpower Happy Face's story. So she's like, use that, all this stuff, and the way that I use this character and the way I write this character is because I know where she's coming from and what her history is. Even if nobody else ever knows that or sees that, I think it leads to a more three-dimensional, well-rounded character just because you're writing her from a more real place.
Sure. Also about writing from a real place, I don't know how you're probably the same. Like, bring like elements. You bring elements that are from your life, like people you've known.
Yeah.
God Machine features a lot of cameos from my friends.
Mm-hmm.
Evil God is based on a real person. Limbo God's based on a real person. Good God's based on a real person. And I could actually rattle on a bunch of characters that are based on real people. If anything, they've grown beyond the initial person. But I mean, it has to. It can't be your friend that's in there. And I'm not trying to glorify my friends because I've made them horrible people.
Yeah, I do the same thing. I'll usually combine a couple people that I know, and I'll say these people have the same kind of characteristics. That's the kind of person I want to write. And it's like having the backstory. When you can picture how the person talks, it helps in writing them. A lot of this stuff. So in Wintertown, I had this gay couple, Tim and Marshall, and they were based off my friends Lawrence and Billy. And I feel like I can write them very authentically because I could totally picture how Lawrence talks at any given time. I've had so many conversations with him. I know the way he thinks and the way he talks, and using that as a springboard. I have the character and the characteristics and the way they talk or act, but then you have your story and your plot and the world that you're creating, and you kind of just fuse it all into something new.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I think you and I are both against any kind of overly commercial, strictly for the market art. I know you use people you know and things that you've been through, and I do the exact same thing. Any kind of writing or art for me has to be personal. I have to connect to it in some way.
It has to be true.
Happy Face is about a kid that his parents divorce and he moves to a new town and goes to school. It's I literally wrote my life, and it was not intentional at any level. But when I explain the story to people, I'm talking about myself, and it's awkward.
Right. And I mean, God Machine is obviously very personal to me, and it deals a lot with my depression and problems of feeling alone and whatnot. I might not have lost somebody to death or whatever, but I went through breakups and I went through all sorts of different things that led me to wanting to channel my depression somewhere. And I wanted to tell that story, but I also wanted to tell a weird story.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of that. It definitely, I'm drawing from what I know, obviously, and also what is true to me. And an authentic story that's not just, I just want to say Baby Yoda because I just want to say Baby Yoda.
Well, this actually nicely dovetails, and I apologize for how long this is. There's going to be a lot of videos, but this dovetails nicely into my other thing, which is the idea of, I've never gotten to do this, you have, is kind of playing in somebody else's playground, using, so eventually I want to get to traditional publishing versus self-publishing.
Mm-hmm.
To get there, the idea of doing something that you created entirely out of your brain, the God Machine, this did not exist in any way before you created it.
Right.
Versus, you've worked on Jim Henson products and John Carpenter, you've written other people's, or you've drawn for other people's stories. You've worked on Fraggle Rock comics.
Yeah.
Like, I would love to do that. I think that would be so fun. I think ultimately I want to tell my own stories because I have to be personally invested. I have to be expressing myself.
Right.
But I would love to just draw a Spider-Man story.
Right, sure. I mean, like, so one of the great things, like, especially about Fraggle Rock, was it was playing in an old familiar playground because I grew up watching Fraggle Rock when it was its heyday of when it was
you
on.
get to like put your spin on it, like you get to draw it from your view,
right? And also, like, because I was a fan of Fraggle Rock, I could find some continuity errors in what the person who wrote it. And I told my editor, and he's like, "Oh, you're absolutely right. You're a writer. Fix that." I'm so sorry to, was it Jason Burns who wrote the story?
Actually, in Fraggle Rock Season 2, Episode 4.
Well, it was more like, there was a slamming of the door joke that happened multiple times. And the thing is, they don't have doors in Fraggle Rock.
And it's a recurring joke. How did you fix that?
I just kept on having, like, Gobo kick Boober out. Like, by a foot, by, like, tossing him with his hands, and, like, just, like, it was a very hard problem to solve, because slamming a door in someone's face over and over again is really hard to vary up that kind of thing. Anyways, whatever. But it was fun to play in that world and also do my own style. Henson they were a little bit like, oh my goodness, is she going to be able to pull this off? These are unusual panels that she's doing. And my editor, like, went to bat for me. He's like, look at the God Machine. This is what she did. And they're like, oh, okay.
And your Fraggle Rock comic's awesome. It's beautiful.
Thank you. I love it.
Yeah.
And also the same for, like, John Carpenter's Tales for Halloween Night Volume 5. That I got to have some creative input with my writer, and it felt like it was equally mine as well, and I got to play in John Carpenter's book, and there's something really cool about that.
It is. Yeah. So let's talk about publishing. We'll kind of wrap this up soon. So I feel like we had similar paths to publishing, although I feel like yours was much more online in front of a audience. You kind of developed your style and your persona through DeviantArt and LiveJournal and building your following there on your way to publication, whereas mine was all probably a few years earlier into the 90s. I didn't really have a computer. It's just me drawing these cartoons and mailing them out to syndicates and stuff. Mailing something out to SLG, and eventually, 8 months later, getting a response saying, hey, this is pretty good. You're still working on this? But eventually we both found our way to traditional publishing.
Yes.
So you mentioned before that you had tried submitting something to SLG.
Right.
That didn't work out too well.
No, it did not work out.
Because you would have been a good fit there.
I would have been... Dan Votto, speaking
All
to you. You're not listening to this, but it's okay. I forgive you.
Oh, wow. Nice. But you eventually did find publishing elsewhere.
I did.
And you got to publish in full color, which is amazing.
Right. So the whole story is that New York Comic Con that we met, I was pitching God Machine. I had 6 pitch packages with me, which is just a booklet that featured the synopsis, character descriptions plus character illustrations, what I saw, the overview of the whole entire thing, and sequentials. And they were all in black and white. And Dan Votto passed on it. I won't say the things that he said. But I brought it to Mark Smiley at Archaea, and he's like, can you do this in color? And I freaked out. I was not prepared to do it in color. Now, at the time, I started coloring a book called Sullen Gray, which was published by Ape Entertainment. and I was cutting my teeth on that book. I was doing these very painterly, expressive pages and whatnot, and so I had a little bit of that behind me. I also had a couple other people that were interested, but Archaea was really strongly we're really interested in this, and so this doesn't necessarily happen this often, but it was probably 7 months later. I had a mental breakdown. What am I doing with my life? Why am I not doing God Machine yet? And I asked my friend Alex Ekman-Lawn of Awakening, which is published by Archaea, how do you like being with Archaea? And Alex was like, oh, Mark was just asking about you a week ago. He was wondering what you're doing with the God Machine. You should talk to him now. And I'm like, okay. And so then that's when I started talking to Mark, and he's like, can you give me some sample pages in color? I'm like, okay. And I was scared, but I did it, and I did these gorgeous colored pages, and he's like, all right, let's get you a contract.
Yeah.
So this doesn't happen.
Well, mine really doesn't happen. I mean, my story, at least for the my indie comic stuff, was just me sending out pitches and eventually getting somebody to publish them. But my young adult publishing, literally,
Oh yeah, it's crazy.
a junior editor at that time decided she was going to embark to New York Comic Con to find some great properties for her boss to work on. Hi, Connie. And we were fated to meet, and I honestly don't recall the conversation we had, but she sent me an email a few days later saying, hey, remember me? We were talking about Emo Boy, and I think you have a good voice for young adult, and you ever think about writing young adult novels? And I was like, Little Brown Publishing, young readers, what is this nonsense outfit? And I was like, oh, this is the company that published The Catcher in the Rye. I guess they're legit. Literally the biggest publisher in the world just said, hey, you want to write a book? Which is not the way it happens. And she later said, I should never have done that. That was so unprofessional. And as I'm sitting there working on 7 different pitches, hoping one of them gets made, she's like, what if he can't write a book? What am I going to do? I'm wasting his life here. And I'm going to have to get him an agent somehow. I got to do something. This is going to be terrible. But she worked on the book with me, and we were able to get it through sales and acquisitions. It went on to get 3-starred reviews and got me 2 other young adult novels and boosted her career. So it ended up being this whole great thing that just never would have happened. And in a way, I always think it sounds like I'm saying, oh, somebody walked up and handed me a book job on an author.
But they did.
They did, but I did enough work prior to that. When they say when opportunity knocks,
Right.
Open the door, but you have to do the work and be ready for it.
Absolutely.
If opportunity came and I hadn't done the work, if I hadn't done all those comics and all the comic strips before that and, worked my butt off to get to that point, I wouldn't have been able to capitalize on it in any way. It's a very, very lucky break, and sometimes lucky breaks happen.
Right.
And that's great when it happens, but in the meantime, do the work.
Yeah, no, I think that's probably the biggest thing. We might have had opportunities, but because we were prepared, the opportunities, came to us, and we excelled at each one of these things. But if it hadn't happened that way, we'd still be doing the work. We'd still be getting the work out there. We'd be figuring out how to get published and whatnot. Of course, now we're deciding to take the role of being the publisher.
Right. So to get there, so we've both been published. I know I have frustrations with publishing. For me, I want to just do what I want to do. I have ideas and I love them and I'm passionate about them. I just want to write them, put them out in the world and see what happens. And in publishing, like I said, I got to go through my agent. I got to go through the editor. She's got to bring it to the sales team. like to have an acquisitions meeting, which is every editor has to all agree this is a book that we should publish. And, like the sales team has to say, okay, I can take this book and sell it to bookstores all over the world. So they're thinking about, is this going to get in schools? Are librarians going to recommend this? Are books going to be put out on the end tables at the bookstore? Like, there's a lot of thought. Like, for me, I come up with an idea and I think, like, yeah, this is kooky and weird. This reminds me of the shit I went through in 5th grade. I'm going to write it. And they're like, well, that's great. And it's kind of interesting. Who's this for? Who's the audience? Why are other people interested in this? And I go, oh, I didn't think about that. So I just want to work and throw things out there. And I got a lot of red tape and blocks and no, not this, try that again, do it this way. A lot of pushback constantly. So that was a big frustration for me.
Right. One of the things that I had was that it was hard to produce a book because there was no money.
Mm-hmm.
And that was a big roadblock for me. I haven't had problems with the content, but I also had some conversations that didn't bode well in certain regards, where in some instances there was talks of like making something a movie and how much people would own of my property, and that was one of the things that I didn't like. And when I didn't play the game,
they don't want,
they don't want anything to do with you.
Some publishers, if they're not going to make a bunch of money off of it, they don't. I mean, SLG is a rarity. I mean,
right.
Say what you will, but SLG launched a lot of careers. A lot of people Dan took on because he liked their work, published their comic, and then especially in that late 2000s time, all these book publishers for the first time started saying, hey, we could actually make some money publishing these things. Let me pull a Jim Rugg out of there. Let me pull this person and that person.
Yeah.
And suddenly everybody was getting these major book deals and leaving SLG. I mean, with SLG, I did not make a lot of money.
Right.
I think like my first couple issues, I made a few $100 on.
Yeah.
Not much else. But a lot of people saw it. So talking about Hollywood, I worked on an Emo Boy movie. This happened right when the writer's strike was on, and I wasn't any kind of guild member, so I was like, yeah, I'll write the movie, sure. First they were going to get a screenwriter because of the thing. They asked me if I wanted to write it, so I wrote the movie. They were throwing money at me for like a period of 2 years. I mean, I got like, maybe 40-something thousand to write it, around 8,000 just for the option to make it. And after the option ran out after a year, they were sending me $1,000 every month just to keep the option because they were so confident we were going to get it made. And so SLG I had all the rights to Emo Boy.
Right.
When we did the contract, I said I would like SLG to have a percentage of this because he took a major gamble on me and I wouldn't have this without him and that company. So I felt like I owed something to them. But the point is Hollywood has a lot of money. They're just throwing out there, and it's a good place to be.
Right. Well, so one of our things as being Machina Corps, we're looking to publish unique and unusual ideas. And it's not necessarily because we're hitting demographics. Not to say that we won't pursue, like, trying to get movie money at some point or another. But the idea is that you, Steve, get to do your own vision.
Yeah.
That's not like cater to males 13 to 35.
Well, that's the thing. Like with publishing, they have reach, they have a loud voice.
Yeah.
They go to conventions. So they would fly me out to Chicago for like a librarian conference. And they would have stacks, a giant stack, like a well of my book, like in advance form. And they'd just give them out to everybody. And I'd be like, how are you ever going to sell my book if you're just handing them to people? But they have money, they have reach, they have voice, they know how to get your stuff out there. They have a platform. So I have ideas and things that I'm passionate about and creative about, but I don't have the platform. So I think my goal right now is to create my own platform so I don't need the publisher, that we can publish and be able to promote our own projects is basically the dream, where you can come up with weird stuff and get it out there and find like-minded voices and people that think the way you do and love that kind of weird stuff.
Right.
Be able to advertise it, be able to make money off of it. And it's going to take a lot of work and a lot of learning, and it's a big process, but that's also kind of a really fun adventure that we're on.
Right. And we also, when we get to the point, we want to nurture similar voices.
Mm-hmm.
And I think this is really important because we're not censoring ourselves, and we are putting out content that we're hoping jives with people. Not a demographic, not a this, not a that.
Yeah.
Got any more questions?
No, I think that's about it. That went about 5 times longer than I intended, but that's all right. Thank you, Chandra Free.
Thank you, Stephen Eli.
And let's go make some comics.
Yeah!
Yeah!
All right, and that is a wrap, folks. I know way back in the writing horror episode, I promised an episode about story structure, which sounds like it's going to be English class, but I promise there's so much interesting stuff, and I can't wait to talk about my process for writing and outlining and organizing thoughts. I'm also going to do a video on style, something more art focused, kind of finding your style. So I'm excited for that. But next week I want to try something a little different. I figure we're still early enough into this series that I'm playing around and kind of figuring out what this is. The first few videos I kind of had a structure set down already, introduced the video, art process video, kind of watch me draw, and I just talk about whatever subject it is. If you like that, please leave comments, let me know. I really want to know what's working, what's not working, and that's what I'm kind of trying to find out still. So, if you love the art process stuff, let me know. If you like me talking to the camera, I could do more of that. Let me know. If you like these last interview videos, I can do more of those. Ultimately, this is all about you, about the audience, the fan, the comic book reader, the comic book creator. I want to know what's working and what you're enjoying and what you'd like to see. But next week, I'm going to try something a little different. I'm going to pick out some of my old sketchbooks. I have piles and piles of sketchbooks going back to like 1993, I think, like the early 90s. So I want to kind of track my story through sketchbooks and kind of look at my oldest art and my interests and how that evolved through the late 90s, through the 2000s and the 2010s, through the 2010s, I'll try that again, through my published works and kind of create a story there, the story of Steve through sketchbooks. And I think that's going to be a lot of fun. I'm just going to sit there and go through a lot of old stuff with you, and I'm excited about that. So we're trying stuff. We're in the trying stuff period. So please like, comment, subscribe. We're trying to break 100 subscribers so that we can get a nice clean URL so it's easier to share the YouTube page. Eventually that's going to seem like a tiny little goal, like, wow, they were still trying to get 100 subscribers. They're up to like 12 million now. It's crazy. Everybody starts somewhere. All right, so I will see you next week. That was some 3D effect. I hope you had your 3D glasses on. I will see you next week right here on Let's Make Comics via Machina Corps.
Keep it spooky.
Hey, Spookies. Boy, are you in for a treat. We are going to dig through some old sketchbooks. I'm talking really old. There's going to be bad art, nasty art, icky poo art. But I love it. I love all of it. It's all done with heart and with passion. even the bad stuff, which is most of it. I always thought whatever it is I was doing at the time was the best that I could do at that time. And I loved making it. I loved making art. That's what I did. That's what saved me as a kid. There was never a time in my life that I wasn't drawing, that I didn't have a sketchbook that I was working on. So I'm not going to talk too much here. So let's go grave digging. Let's dig that up, open it up, see what story it tells. I don't know how this is going to go. We're going to figure it out together. Okay, so these right here are the sketchbooks. We got 1, 2, 3 tubs just full of old art. Alright, so forgive me for any shaky cam stuff. Top off of this. So this is recent art. This is stuff I've been doing for first offerings and for my webcomic. These are some spooky images. Here we go, sketchbooks. Circuit, one of my first supervillains. She's got almost no clothes on. It was the early 90s. Look at this, stuff you get in the pharmacy for like 99 cents way back when. This box right here is a time capsule from kindergarten. Look at this. Okay, so I'm just starting with, this is one of the oldest ones I could find. This is probably from like early 90s. So this was my character Marcy. She was basically like Kathy Geiswit. Let's see, here's Marcy, the Untold Secrets. Oh, we got some Beauty and the Beast stuff in here. So, okay, not late 80s. This is, wow, it's got to be like 92 or something. Wow, that's so weird. I thought I was I thought I was a better artist circa 92. Here's Marcy dealing with anger with an axe. She's violent. This is from the Nintendo game Dragon Warrior. Here's some Dragon Warrior guys again. I was super into the first and second Dragon Warrior role-playing games on the Nintendo. Marcy and dating. Hello. I don't know. I got nothing for this. Marcy the dance single. So every page is literally just Marcy doing something. This is not a great use of a sketchbook. Here we got Lumiere. Here we go, some awesome fan art for Maniac Mansion on the Nintendo. Obviously, I'm a big gamer. Here's some Little Mermaid VHS cassette. I didn't get that one tower that's in the actual VHS cassette that's supposed to look like a penis. Apparently, 92. Confirmed. 92 Steve was not aware of that. Me strong. So 1992, I am like, what am I like, 13? I'm 13-year-old and this is what I'm drawing? This is outrageous. My God. I don't know. Oh, here we go. Here comes the jokes. We got Michael Hound instead of Michael Jackson. You can see my humor is coming out already. We got Kit and Play instead of Kid and Play. Get ready for this one. Slash from Guns N' Roses. Chasing Cats. And there he is, MC Hound. I think that's enough of that one. Let's see what we got with this one. I'm gonna say this is a couple years later. This is probably like 93, 94. But it's crazy to look at how much my art changed in literally like a year or two. I'm doing like cross-hatching and I'm into comic books now. This is my character Pierce. He's got tough skin apparently. Alright, this is where I'm super into rap. Cool kitty cat, dreads, flat top, 6-pack. Here's Jimmy. This is my like 1993 character. He was like a really short kid who wanted to play basketball. His name was Jimmy. Here's some fan art of the Tupac Thug Life song, Under Pressure. Wow. Oh, this is embarrassing. This is like fan art I drew for my chorus teacher that I had a crush on. This is so awkward, and yes, I did show this to her. I'm mortified. Here we got Voodoo from Jim Lee's Wildcats. I think that's it for that book. Here we go, 1995. We got Pocahontas. Super into the Disney stuff. Anytime a new Disney movie came out, I wanted to draw the art. So some different characters from Pocahontas. I had big dreams of going to Florida to be a famous Disney animator. So here's me copying Todd McFarlane. Trying to see how he does detail and stuff. I mean, it's pretty good. And that's kind of one of the ways I taught myself, was by copying other people. Of course, once I'm back to drawing my own stuff, it's not that good. Here we got more rappers. We got Corrupt the Kingpin and the Lady of Rage. I was a big Death Row fan. Good start. Here we go, 1997. Cloud Strife, Final Fantasy VII. This must have been, this is not an original picture. I'm sure I was looking at something, but still pretty cool. Here's some Joe Quesada art, copying, learning. Here's my own characters, Sapphire. Oh my goodness, it's Brianna. Steve's got a girlfriend. Check this out. Ooh. Here's a little sketch for a drawing I did for Brianna. That's like when I asked her out, I think. She's got a gun pointed at the camera. Romantic. This is my shiny police dude, Topaz. 1997, I'm a high schooler. I'm a senior in high school and graduated in 97. Okay, let's read this one. Topaz, aka Warren Cunningham, or of Powers. Cop by day, Topaz by night. Created with brother scientist. Jenny Suede discovers secret. Teflon discovers through chick at bar he sends. I have no idea. Listen, it's 1997. It's okay. Sephiroth. That's how we're bringing in 98. Still into Final Fantasy, clearly. Tifa. All right, here we go. I think we're in 98 still here. These are my 9 to 5 characters. This is how cops dressed back in the 90s. Humberto Ramos. I was really amazed at the way he knew how to shade. I tried my own over here. Did not come out so good. No, we're not even going to show that one. We got some more Frank Miller inspiration. 99. Look at this hefty thing. This thing's a giant. All right, we've gone all the way to the year 2000. Steven's stupendous sketchbook. So I'm getting more into writing. A lot of jotting down ideas. Steve's movie. At this point, I'm filming movie stuff already. Here's me working on my comic strip. Trying to do some different character sketches. It's my grandmother. So here's me drawing everybody in my sketch comedy group. We got Mikey. That's me at the time I had hair. Bobby. Kurt. My cousin Sarah. Elaine. This is me just doing sketches of people from Entertainment Weekly. There's the famous J-Lo outfit. I think that's Pamela Anderson, Lucy Liu, Denzel Washington. It's Rick Schroeder when he was on NYPD Blue. I forgot about that. George Carlin, Little Kim. It's a really bad Savage Dragon. Doggos. There's Kevin Smith. Alright. That was pretty fun. Alright, here's something not a sketchbook, but still kind of a time capsule. This is, I've been painting. That's not blood. Hellboy. Sorry for the reflections. More Hellboy. This is around when I went to San Diego Comic-Con. Or 2001, yeah. And I brought a lot of this art to show people. I was really trying to get some kind of work as a comic book artist. Obviously, it's not very good in retrospect. Or at least not enough that I'm getting hired off of it. But you can see I'm improving. These are some sketches for a Dark Horse Comics competition I got on their website. I don't think I got in the finished book, but I did get featured on their website for it. Let's see here, Mephisto notes. There was a time where Marvel was holding like open submission things, early 2000s. You could just kind of pitch something on their little used characters. So I wanted to do a series on Mephisto that was kind of a slice of life comic and show how the devil interacts in people's lives. Oh, my manga influence is coming along well here. Getting a little better. Colorful. DJ Bear. These were nice little sketchbooks. The paper quality is really nice. It's like a Bristol board almost. Some I was trying to do a graphic novel adaptation of a movie script I had written. The movie was ridiculous. This is for my manga pitch, Meet Me After Class, about a bunch of teachers that are slackers and students that want to learn. I wrote a movie for this one too called Art Show. It's a bunch of different outfits. This is kind of fun. This is the Meet Me After Class website design. This is some good early 2000s website back when, you know, you could write HTML and tables and piece together all the art yourself. So this is fun. This right here, Emo Boy. Boy with emo superpowers. This is the very first writing anywhere I did about Emo Boy. Emo Boy helps little kid get girl. Picked on at lunch, daydreaming. School picture, accidentally smiles. Everyone thinks he is cute. Anti-war Emo Boy. School career day. Parents put Emo Boy up for adoption. Girl with surgically enhanced anime eyes tries to join Emo Boy. Alright, interesting. Very first sketches of him were like Connor Oberst, bright eyes. Some different sketches of what he could look like. Didn't have his glasses yet. Emo. This little teenage Rivers Cuomo style from Weezer. Got the glasses on him now. Emo Vampire. Interview Magnolia spoof. That made it into the first issue. It's starting to look like him. Alright. Had this idea that I would draw for music magazines. I'm trying some Elliott Smith stuff. Bob Dylan over here. Cartoon Network Adult Swim ideas. Locks self in room forever. Creates a creepy imaginary friend. Turns invisible at school. Autobio issue. Wins dinner with his favorite musician. Here's a big blue book. Okay, so this is around the Emo Boy era. So this is mid-2000s. There's a bunch of pictures of Rivers Cuomo. I actually wrote Carl, the website guy for Weezer, to see if Rivers Cuomo would want to do an autobiographical book that I would draw. I was super into Weezer. I think this was from like one of Rivers' live journal things. I was kind of doing a example of what it could look like. Christy Lajewski. This is from her SLG comic. Here's a comic I was working on with Jen Kwan, a very talented artist. I was trying really hard to get into Tokyo Pop's Rising Stars of Manga. A lot of places were having these kind of like open submissions and contests and stuff, and I was just trying everything I could. Music ideas. I wanted to be a musician at one point. Everything sometimes. Broken home. Driving home. At war with yourself. And I was the first casualty. Thank God this didn't happen. Good at times. I wish I could be more, don't we all? I'm playing Metroid and Mother Brain is cheating, so fuck off and leave me alone. The original first volume title is Supremely Humble Work of Grand Ambition and Stunning Emo. And this is fun. This is, so there's a lot of loose paper in here. This is my jam strip book. It's mostly me and Elaine. I'm not going to read all of these, maybe if I find a short one, but I got the idea from Joe Matt and Seth and Chester Brown. They would take turns. One person would start a comic. Each panel they would alternate until you wrap up the comic. Let's see. Bloop, bloop. We have a 732 in progress. The cops! We got some dinosaur and some clown stealing things. It's a 732 and a 498. The cops! Oh, it's prostitute horses. What's more important, a Barney Bozo robbery or horse prostitution ring? Bunch of monkeys attack. Damn you, 614! Here's the actual book. Some of these are pretty long. We're usually waiting for a movie to start or sitting at a restaurant or something. Here's a good one, Mystery Science Theater. It's Mystery Science Theater 3000. Not anymore, it ain't. Joel, friend, buddy, you don't have to do this. Tom Servo zaps him. I didn't program you to do that. Looks more like Mike Nelson. Self-destruct imminent. Self-destruction. Vacate the premises. Dr. Forrester, it is I who programmed that, and I will destroy you. Don't act so innocent. After all, you did just violently murder one of your few companions. But I made him. Refer to theme song. Can I not unmake him? Well, in theory, sure, but can a mother kill her son? No, it's ethics. You must take these things into account before acting so rashly. Actually, according to this, and the planet explodes. Jam strips. Dun dun dun! Happy face. Now look at that. Now that is some writing. What you run from are the things you need most. Theme, family, history, and self. Happiness is a smile away. Let's see how close this is. This is the very first anything. Happy face ideas. Act 1. Pushes away friends and family. Indulges self in experiment and new people. Act 2. Immersed in friends, a new relationship. Loses old life. New people turn into the old people. Want him to open. Relationship ends and is outcasted from friends. Act 3. Binge of self-hatred and hatred towards others. Smile is maniacal. Breaks. Act 4. Broken, he opens. Family picks up the pieces and are what he needs. It's not an introvert trying to be an extrovert. It's interesting. There's a lot of interest. Look at all this writing. Oh my God. It's so tiny too. I don't know if you can tell. Look how tiny that writing is. Like a crazy person. My shadow lingered long behind, clinging to lockers and floor tiles. The chatter faded to white noise as I crashed through closed doors. Mom was waiting when I got out, and I won't be looking back. I was trying to write poetry. I wanted poetry in the earliest drafts. So this whole sketchbook is dedicated to just happy face stuff. This was my cover. The actual cover is so much better than what I did. Yeah, there's some early sketches of Karma and Misty. Had some random quotes here. I see her and I want to throw up and my confidence plummets and I want to walk into a wall or crawl under a table. But those are good feelings too. They sure are. Scenes. Purposefully falls downstairs for attention. That happened. Laugh and laughs with Gretchen. Giddy. Can't stop. Like giant rising above clouds. Paint wall guidance. That's a reference to my own childhood. Wall painting for the guidance counselor. A lot of these things, that's like a page in the book. So my sketchbook is Happy Faces sketchbook. So in ways, I'm figuring out this story and actually writing the story and things that are final images at the same time. Dogging it. This is me trying to create my own font. This weird looking book is the Bright Lights, Dark Nights sketchbook. Originally titled Waitman. Previous notes. So my earliest notes. Ideas and inspirations. French New Wave. Pulp mystery. Comic books. Hip hop. Bullying. Tension. Trouble always bubbling and escalating. Odd choice making. Focuses on odd things. Inability to act. Rationalizes. Emo. Everything was writing. Not a lot of art. Although this book was going to eventually be very art focused and comic book stuff, so got some sketches in here. Things I still like. I'm revisiting the idea here. Comic books, hip hop, wrestling, bullies, hobbies, alcoholism, broken family, unrequited love, girls, shyness. Waitman 2.0. This is a revisit. This is like halfway through this book. I kind of decided that a lot of the comic stuff wasn't going to happen and that we were going to refocus on this interracial relationship. So we're kind of rebooting the whole thing halfway through. Here's a little map I made, trying to keep in track of where everything in the town is, where everybody lives. That's what goes into writing a book. A whole lot of note-taking. That was fun, right? Right! It's cool to have these little time capsules and see what it is that you were into at the time, what influenced you at the time, especially when you're ancient like me and you've got years and years, decades of sketchbooks. Were you into anime and manga? Were you into comic books? Were you really into movies? Were you into people drawing? I had a phase where I was super into urban sketching and I would go out and I would draw cityscapes and scenery and people. And not just documenting like what you were into, but documenting your skill sets. What were you learning? Like watching your art improve through the years, hopefully improving. How did your art change? What was it like 10 years ago? What did you learn and how did you apply it and how did your art change? And hopefully your newest sketchbooks are your favorite ones and the art you're doing now is your best art and that everything is a learning process and you're constantly evolving. Sketchbooks are such a cool way to kind of watch that evolution in real time. Well, I don't know, maybe not real time, but I'm glad that you got to experience that with me and see my personal evolution. And if your latest sketchbooks aren't your favorite sketchbooks, go challenge yourself. Go draw something. Go make art. Go make new sketchbooks. Challenge yourself. Make something awesome. And find me on Twitter at Steve Emond or any social media. I'm extremely accessible. Comment below. Let's see your art. Let's see your progress. I would love to see what other people's old sketchbooks are like. So I hope this was inspiring and fun on some level. And next week, the long-awaited story structure video. That's going to be fun. It's going to be good. Trust me. So like, comment, subscribe, comment below. Let's talk about our art histories. Let's talk about our sketchbooks. I want to hear about you. And subscribe and ring the bell so you get alerts every time we update. And there's going to be new video series coming up really soon. If it hasn't started already, I don't think quite yet. And stay inspired. Go draw something.
And keep it spooky.
Hey spookies. So real quick check-in. By the time this video posts, it'll be the end of February. I'll have posted 7 other videos by now. Introduction, goal setting, getting past your failures, writing horror, talking to Chan, talking to Chan, talking to Chan. 3 Chan videos. Alright, that's kind of a cheat, but that's at least 5 videos, so worth doing a check-in. Back in my second video for goals, back in the beginning of January, good time for setting goals, I mentioned some of the things that I wanted to accomplish with this series and throughout this year. To be fair, that's January and February. I got 10 more months to go. So I wanted to connect with the public, make new fans, be available for my existing fans and for those new fans. I wanted to grow my following from where it was at the beginning of the year and deepen my connection with my following, which sounds like some kind of weird messiah, complex thing. It's not that, but I mean, as a public figure, as an artist or an author, platform is important nowadays, and it's something that I know I struggle with and I need to work on. So that's what I'm doing here. And researching social media platforms, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, it's all algorithm related, and it's complicated these days. It's not as easy as put something out there and everybody will like it, That didn't work for me, honestly, in 2000. So in 2020, it's really difficult. It's a lot of work. So have I met my goals? Definitely not even close. The videos are a work in progress. I'm trying to move a little bit away from here's me, here's how I do things, here's my process, here's my goals. I'm trying to make it a little more about the viewer, about you. How can I help you? What is it that you want to see? What would you like to know about me? What tips do I have? How did I get to where I'm at? Like, okay, so my social media is lacking, but I've published 3 books. I've done a graphic novel series. I've worked on a movie, so I've done some things right. What could I share to you? What did I succeed at, and what could I help you succeed at? Hopefully I can offer something here and telling my story and how I did things. So I haven't really gained many followers. A few, and I'm very appreciative for everybody that does follow me on Instagram, at Stephen Emond Art, or on Twitter at Steve Emond, or here on YouTube with Machina Corpse. We started a second channel here where Chan and I play spooky video games, and that's a lot of fun. I'm hoping that helps in terms of building our following here. It's very hard to get people to care, or not even just to care enough to click on a link or to click follow, but just to see what you're tweeting to your own followers doesn't necessarily show up. So if I have 500 followers, I could tweet something and Twitter may only show it to 15 people, which is crazy and kind of annoying, but that's the algorithm now. Now, if I tweet something to 15 people and 10 of those people like it or comment on it or retweet it, then it expands. Twitter goes, okay, this is a quality tweet right here. I'm going to show it to more people. It's going to show it to maybe 100 of my followers. And if more people interact, it's going to show it to all my followers. So that's why it's so important when we say things like, comment, and subscribe. It's not just because that's our ego check and, hey, if they like, comment, subscribe, that means we're doing it right. It's literally so YouTube even shows anybody that our videos are out. If enough people engage and interact with it, we go up in the algorithms. I'm making shadows on my face here. This one's a dog. It really is super important, and we want to reach as many people as we can. We want to get those numbers up. We want to build our YouTube followings. We want to build up our Twitter followings, our Instagram followings, all that stuff. It's really important. That's our platform, and as a new company, you have to have a platform to sell your stuff off of. We're going to be doing comic books and graphic novels, and we're going to be printing things and bringing people in, and all that stuff doesn't mean anything if nobody sees what we're doing. So this is all a process. It's February. It's something we're working on. Let me know if there's anything I could do different. So evaluation. Still new at this. Not growing exponentially. We did reach 100 followers on YouTube here, so that means we finally have a nice URL. That's great. We're just going to keep putting stuff out. We're going to put out Let's Make Comics every Wednesday, Once Upon a Midnight Gaming every Monday, every Friday. So that's 3 days a week right there. We're going to be on social media more. I'm going to be starting a webcomic soon, and there's going to be a lot more about that in this series. So much more to come. It's only February. This is going to be a huge year. It's going to be really productive for me. The past few years, I haven't had anything really out there in the public, so this is going to be a big year. If you like any of my stuff, please subscribe, follow, because there's going to be a lot of stuff coming out, and I'm really excited about it. So, today, structure video. I've been promising it for weeks. That Exhumed conversation with Chandra was so big and so fun that it took up a good 3 weeks, but I've been promising this one forever. I'm going to lay out all of my tips and tricks for when I'm working on stories, how I kind of cement them into a solid pitch. A lot of this stuff comes from different books that I've read. It's really kind of fun. It's really fun doing these story structures. It's like being in English class and doing homework, except the homework's on your book, which is like makes it actually interesting and something that you want to do. Figuring out the who's, the hows, the whys, the wheres, all that stuff. Making sense of your story so that it makes sense to other people, that it tells a complete story, that it doesn't have loopholes everywhere, that things happen for a reason. It's all related to structure. It's probably the most important thing that people need to work on when they're creating their stories. This is all stuff, before you write word one, this is all outlining and planning and structuring. This is all the before work to make sure when you are writing, everything's going to come out smoothly and just the way you want it. So enjoy the video. Let me know what you think in the comments. I know I just gave you a whole spiel about it. Comment, like, subscribe. It means so much. You don't even know. And enjoy the video. Glad to be doing this again. So when it comes to story structure, I always try to think of things in chunks. It's easier to manage for me if it's just one piece at a time that you're thinking, even if the piece is the entire story. That's actually sometimes the easiest piece. And then you take each one of those chunks and you break it down just one at a time. So in writing, there tends to be outliners and instinctual writers. The people that want to map out everything, that's generally where I fit in. And there's the people that don't like to plan anything out and just figure it out as they go. They're experiencing the story as their character's experiencing the story. And even though I consider myself an outliner, there's definitely some merit to instinctual writing. We do have an instinct for it. Everyone is basically listening to stories their entire lives from a very young age. I mean, how many hours of television have you watched? How many songs have you listened to? Everything is really a story, and I think it's kind of built into us how a story should look and feel. So I do believe if you start off just writing something, you're going to end up with some kind of story. There is good reason to write without outlining. I think there's a lot of spontaneity and strangeness and vibe that you can capture a lot easier just letting your mind wander than you can trying to do everything scientifically. And I tend to do a little of both. I like to incorporate both. You do that instinctual work, and for me that means thinking about the images that come to mind when I'm thinking up a story, figuring out the themes, doing an exercise where I picture what the movie trailer could look like. A lot of that impulsive planning kind of writing I do instinctually. When I first think of an idea, how many weird things can I picture? What does that movie trailer look like? What kind of scenes do I want? What's just the tonal concept I'm going for? What emotions do I want to invoke? All that stuff is not really outlining. That's stuff that you can just kind of let your mind go and figure out. And when you kind of have that fresh story and ideas and characters, then you can use outlining to structure it into something that really works. My favorite metaphor is to think of writing as sculpting clay. Like, you can't sculpt anything until you slap some clay down on a table. And initially, that's nothing but a giant mound of clay. There's really nothing there, but that's basically your very first tool to work with. The slab of clay is the genre you want to work in. It's the first image that comes to mind for your story idea. It's a loose concept or a character you really want to write. That's that first big meaty thing that you slap down and go, okay, this is something I'm going to work with now. For my book Happy Face, it was literally the title. I just wrote Happy Face. What could this be? That's my putting that slab of clay down on the table, something to work with. Then you start to shape it. That's the second step. That's adding in a twist or a hook. So if I say I want to write a superhero story, that's great. There's a million super stories. What's the twist? What's the hook? What's the actual thing that you're going to kind of sell there? I'm going to write a superhero story where the superhero is a homeless person. I mean, that's your first little twist. That's the first time you mold it into something. And high concept, you've probably heard the term high concept. So a high concept story oftentimes is just that. It's literally a genre, like a real broad concept, and they twist it in such a brilliant way that somebody says, wow, like without knowing anything else about it, I want to see that story. I will give you money to see that story. That's why it's high concept. It's so out there. Like, what a twist. So I mean, by the second step, you could be making money with plotting out your story. The first major shaping is coming up with a 3-act story. So you take your big broad idea, you come up with a little twist to it, a little hook, and then you figure out, okay, in 3 acts, what is this? What's the beginning? What's the middle? And what's the end? And with that, you have a story. With bright lights, dark nights, the beginning, let's see, well, first off, the big story is it's about modern interracial romance. The twist is it's also about modern racial politics that get in the way of the romance. 3 acts, boy meets girl. That's kind of how these things tend to go. It's usually a romance story would be boy meets girl, boy loses girl, boy gets girl back. If you want to be sexist, I guess, I don't know. It could be girl gets girl. So in Bright Lights, Dark Nights, it's boy meets girl, politics get in the way with this big racial profiling case that splits up the romance, and the boy has to kind of look within his own inner racism. He's got to kind of come to terms with some of his own concepts and get over them in order to resume this romance and get the girl back. So that's kind of the 3 acts of the story. The next thing I do is I do something with the middle, because if you look at a 3-act story, traditionally it's more like 4 acts, right? Except the middle 2 are both one big giant act. So an easy way to kind of flesh out the middle, which could be a very long part of your story, is to do some kind of big twist or inversion. Something big happened right in the middle of the story. And Happy Face, spoiler alert, skip a few seconds if you don't want to hear this. We find out why Happy Face is doing his big social experiment involving a death of a family member. In Wintertown, I changed the character's perspective. So instead of the whole book being from the perspective of Evan and trying to figure out what's going on with Lucy, all of a sudden halfway through we flip the entire thing. We go from Lucy's point of view. We quickly learn everything she's been up to and finish out the story from her point of view. So the 3-act structure not only works for talking about chunks of story, it doesn't just work for the full story, which is where you first use it, but it also works for every single chapter. So whether it's a chapter of a book or an issue of a comic book, almost everything you write can be its own 3 acts. A scene could be split into 3 acts, and it just helps solidify the story structure. It helps show that something's going to change, that there's a reason for the scene. So not only do I divide chapters into 3 acts, I make sure something changes every chapter. If it starts on a positive note, make it end on a negative note. Then you know something worthwhile happened in that chapter. If it starts on a negative note, make something positive happen. Kind of change the value, invert things. That way things are always moving, things are always happening, and it keeps it interesting. So I mean, that's some real basic story structure tips I wanted to give you. There are so many maps to use whenever you get lost. There's questions I ask myself, like, what am I writing about? Like, what am I really writing about? Not what's the story, what is this character doing, but what makes this story interesting to me? Like, what emotions do I want to talk about? Like, what makes this something that I feel qualified to write about? So, like, with Happy Face, it's about a kid doing a social experiment and making new friends and relationships. But what I wanted to write about is being a child of divorce, about moving to a new town and a new school, things from my own life, you know? So when you get lost and you're trying to figure out what should happen next, think about what is it that you're really writing about, what is it that you care about, and that can give you a guideline of where you want to be or where you need to get to. Thematically, thinking of the theme, what is this story about? Come back to that as often as you can in as many different ways as you can. You know, a theme doesn't have to be just one line somewhere in there. A theme can be something that shows up in all of the characters' relationships, his adversarial relationships, his romantic relationships, or hers. Also, if you get stuck, look at your scenes, look at your chapters, look at the moments you have, kind of lay them all out. What's missing? You know, how do you get from this chapter that you planned out to this next chapter that you know is going to be really good? What's missing in the middle there? And always try to cut what doesn't stack up to your best material and think, how can I make this as good as the best stuff in there? That's something I first learned working with an editor. I'd come up with a bunch of material. Some of it would be really good, and then some of it not so good, but you know, hey, that's how I get to the good stuff. You know, my editor would say, no, cut that. Make this part getting to the good stuff as good as the good stuff. It's tough sometimes, but it's useful, and it's really going to make everything stronger. And you can do it. You came up with the good stuff. You can come up with more good stuff. It's weird writing stories. It's like doing homework, but it's your own story. It's not somebody else's. So instead of sitting there trying to crack the themes and where everything fits in and why they chose this and why they chose that, you're actually doing the choosing. You're coming up with the themes. You're figuring out what's the best way to tell this story and why am I telling it that way. It's it's a puzzle that you have to figure out with your own words. So just always ask the right questions. What is the overall arc of my story? How does my character grow? What do they need to grow? And what scenes can I add to show and challenge that growth? It should be difficult, you know? It shouldn't be easy for your character to grow. Usually, growth is not something... Alright, some people voluntarily jump into growth. A lot of us, it gets forced on us, you know? Crappy things happen, but through it you survive and you grow stronger. So the structure is important. It's something I learned when I was working on Happy Face and when I was working on the Emo Boy movie. At that point, all of the Emo Boy series I had written just instinctually, just because I had seen sitcoms, I had seen cartoons. I knew how a story should end. I knew how it should feel. And a lot of it's good stuff. A lot of it I'm really proud of. But when I was working on the movie and on the book, I kept running into structure problems because I didn't know how a full big story like that should work. You know, the structure is the spine. It's the skeleton of your story. And you can come up with all the cool scenes and dialogue and character tics that you want. but without the proper bones to hang them on, it's not going to stand up. It's just a pile of loose flesh and organs and fluids. It's a soup of human, and that is not a delicious soup. Structure soup is nutritious. All right, so I hope that helped. Story, it's like a living, breathing thing, and it's constantly changing, and just work at it, simplify, mess it up, simplify it again. Stick around. Next week I'm going to do a video on finding your style, whether that's your writing style or your art style. So that one's going to be fun too. Like, comment, subscribe, check out, just bumped into my video there. Check out Once Upon a Midnight Gaming. It's not as instructional, it has more swears, but it's a lot of fun, and it's video games. Who doesn't love video games? All right, that's it. Keep it real. Keep it spooky.
Keep it spooky.
And I'll see you next time. Hey spookies, I'm here to talk to you about style. Not these things. These are nerd glasses. You can tell from the little tape thing here, because the nerds always get punched in the face so their glasses break and they gotta tape them together. That's how. I'm not here to talk about fashion style. I'm here to talk about your writing style and your art style. So style is a very personal thing. Obviously, everybody has their own style. There's different things that come into what creates your style. Inherently, you're going to have your own style just from being you. Everybody's DNA is completely different. And then there's your influences and the things that you're attracted to and drawn to. And then there's your conscious decision making. I want specifically to work in this method for this project. I think it's important to have a style. If you look through any great writer or director or artist in time, you have that unmistakable, this person's known for filming in this style and they use these kinds of cuts and this kind of music, and that's how you're watching so-and-so's movie. It's a way to stand out, a way to brand yourself, a way to do something that nobody else has seen before, which makes you more marketable and publishable. So let's just start off with the easiest thing, which is your unique experience being you. Pull from that. That's something that nobody else can do, and it's instantly going to set you apart from other artists, other writers. You have your own experiences with life, the way you see things, the things you've experienced from your childhood, from growing up, the movies you've seen, the books you've read, the people you've met, the places you've lived in. To me, it might seem really dull for somebody to write about Connecticut. It's kind of a generic state. It doesn't have a whole lot of standout cultural things. I don't want to get the Connecticut hate mail, but I could write from Connecticut because I live there, and I could write it in pretty good detail. And anybody that doesn't live in Connecticut, that's going to stand out. That's going to be kind of a unique thing. Like, oh, let's see what that's about. What does he have to say? Stephen King has made a career on writing about Maine. I've been to Maine once, but to a Maine person, they're probably like, oh God, it's me walking outside my door every morning. But to the rest of the world, it's kind of interesting. It's something that he can speak to. You more than anybody else. All those thoughts in your head, everything that you've thought your entire life, everything that you've been through, are all things that you can write to with great authenticity. And it's something that that nobody else does know. So even if it feels like, God, I'm not writing anything interesting, I'm not writing about espionage and action adventure and great romance, although maybe you are, but you're writing you into somebody else, that's a new world. And it's interesting. Of course, you're also going to draw from your inspirations, from the things you like. And not necessarily just because, oh, this thing's really cool, I really like this thing, so I am going to steal from it. The things that we like tend to be things that we identify with. We like it for a reason. It's something that resonates with us. And I mean, have you ever read something and you go, man, that was so good. I could have written that. I wish I thought of that first because that felt like it came right out of me. That's where we get our influences from. And the person that wrote that thing that you wish you thought of and you could have written, that person thinks that about their own heroes. They aspire to their own set of influences. It's kind of a generational thing where, you look up to your heroes and they look up to their heroes and their heroes look up to their heroes. And everybody's inspired by something. I'll name a few of my inspirations that you can find in my work. Art-wise, I'm always drawn towards brushwork and watercolor. Calvin and Hobbes, Bill Watterson is a huge influence. Every time I draw nature or paint watercolors, I'm thinking of Calvin and Hobbes. Craig Thompson and blankets was a big influence for me. So, like I said, that brushwork. Right now, I'm really into Francesco Francavilla. God, the guy's a monster. He puts out art every day, it seems like, and it's always amazing. But it's been really inspirational, and I'm like, I want to be as good as that. I want to be able to put things out that fast and that good with that much detail and brushwork, and it's just really amazing. So that's kind of a recent influence for me. Nate Powell was an influence. I love Scotty Young's comic work, his just movement and speed. I feel like he just puts energy on paper and makes sense of it later. Like I'm just gonna make this shape and now I'm gonna turn it into something with details, and it's really amazing. So I'm super inspired by that, and I try to bring that kind of energy and movement into my work now. And it works for writing too. So like writing wise, any kind of teen drama, melodrama I'm interested in. I'm always writing about moons and skies and shy, introverted people, relationships, family stuff. Like, I have certain things that I always come to. Like, Paul Thomas Anderson's a director I like. He did Boogie Nights and Punch Drunk Love, and he had a string of movies that all had to deal with father issues. Like, clearly that was something that was really important to him. A lot of times we don't even know that we're doing it. We just kind of write these things over and over, and they're things that we're trying to figure out, and it becomes identifiable piece of your work. The things that you write about, the things that you draw a lot, that's part of your style. And so, like, the third thing would be consciously deciding that I'm going to work in a certain style. For me, I know within the past year I've been drawing a lot of stuff with this kind of three-dimensional textural style where I've just been working in layers. And I've been really into traditional art, hand-drawn art, just throwing paint and ink splatters and newspaper textures and almost anything I can think of. I've just been putting together, and part of that is my current interest in doing a horror project. And somehow I think that kind of gritty realness, that tactile, you can feel it kind of thing, dripping paint and torn edges, all kind of lends itself towards horror. And I think that's kind of a good fit for the project that I'm working on right now. So I've been doing a lot of experimentation personally, intentionally pushing my style in a certain direction. When I was working on Bright Lights, Dark Nights, I wanted there to be a noir influence, like a kind of 40s aesthetic. So I was looking at all these kind of old movie posters and working with heavy shadows and blacks and kind of going for that noir vibe. I was trying to incorporate that into my art style. I've had other projects that intentionally I wanted to have a very cel-shaded look, a very cartoony animated look. There are things that I've done with just flat colors that I've done in Photoshop. Things that I think look great just doing plain watercolors, which is one of my favorite mediums to work in. So I think trying to discover your style, what works for the project and the story that you want to tell, what's something that is comfortable to you, that's easy for you to do, whether you're writing, drawing, whatever it is, you want to be comfortable with it. You want to be happy doing it. If you're not happy making art or writing, you're not going to want to do it, and you're not going to do it. You're not going to finish your project because, you want to make money and you want to sell it to Hollywood. It's not enough. The promise of millions of dollars, okay, it could be enough, but if you're not happy doing it, it's going to be really hard. That's a big mountain to climb. But if you love doing it, if you love to paint a certain way, if you love to draw a certain way, if there are things that you enjoy writing about, it's going to make the process a lot easier, therapeutic oftentimes, and it's going to be something that you're going to be able to finish, and that joy is going to resonate in the work, and it's going to resonate with other people. All right, so kind of a short video this week. I hope that gives you some ideas, some enthusiasm. I hope it gives you a sense of purpose when you're setting off on a new project. Just some things that are really worth thinking about. Things that every project I do, I have to kind of think about. What's my style going to be for this? Which parts of myself do I want to put into this project? What is it that I want to talk about that's going to make this exciting for me? What can I bring to it that's going to say Stephen Iman did this? When people see that, I want them to relate it to me. I want it to build into my brand. I want it to be marketable. I want people to look forward to what I'm doing next because they enjoyed this project so much. And that's something that you just build with time. But yeah, it's worth doing, worth thinking about. Stand out from the pack, that big hungry pack of people out there making comics, making books. There's a lot of competition out there, so it helps to stand out. And be yourself, be happy, do creative, cool things, stay spooky. Oh yeah, and like, comment, subscribe, ring the bell. I'm trying to grow the page here. Those things help immensely. Everything's algorithms these days. If you enjoyed this at all, let me know. Let me know what you like, what you don't like, what you'd like to see more of, any ideas for future videos. I appreciate that. Check out the other videos, Once Upon a Midnight Gaming, and over on Instagram TV, Sketchbook Dissections, which was based on an earlier Let's Make Comics I did with sketchbooks that I thought was a lot of fun. And yeah, go out there and make comics. Hey Spookies, guess what? I have books. Lots of books. Hey, what's up? So I thought that tonight, right now, 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, that I would share with you some of my favorite how-to books, like books on writing, books on drawing, art books, just all kinds of inspirational learning things. I'm a big fan of those kind of books. Someday I'll explain my full story into publishing here, but I found myself at a crossroads at one point trying to write a book and not knowing anything about how to write a book. So I read as much as I could about how to write a book and how to structure a story and how to craft things. And that probably really saved my career there. So I have a lot of favorites that have things that I recommend routinely that I'm super into. I'll explain why I recommend those things, and I'm just going to show you some of my favorite books. So I'll just kind of look through my library a little bit. This is me looking through. I guess I'm walking through a library. So this one's controversial. It's the most thorough thing I've read on story. famously Spike Jonze movie adaptation written by Charlie Kaufman really kind of craps all over this book and the idea that books need to be written a certain way or stories need to be written a certain way. But I mean, honestly, if you can't take anything out of this book, I don't know what to tell you. It's insanely detailed. The amount of information in it and inspiration in it is like limitless. It's really amazing. This one just gets so insanely detailed in terms of this kind of stuff. There's grids for everything. Here you got your classical design, minimalist plots, anti-structure, lots of breaking down scenes in actual books. Like Chinatown has a lot of stuff in there. I've gone through and marked this up with all the stuff I know I'm going to be looking at time and time again. Almost 500 pages of great formulas and structures and everything. Save the Cat. So this is one based on, this is the novel version. It's based on Save the Cat, which is for writing movie scripts, written by Blake Snyder, who passed away. I have mixed feelings on it. Honestly, Blake Snyder, not to speak ill of the dead, can come off very condescending sometimes and a little too exacting in what he's interested in. But it takes the concept of structure and outlining and creating a story from start to finish, and it makes it so simplistic, not in a bad way at all, but it makes you understand why a story works a certain way in a very easy to digest manner. So like one of the first things I do when I'm writing a new project, I take Blake Snyder's beat sheet, which I'll show you in a second here, and I kind of line up my story. And I don't think you need to hit every single beat, but you see the weaknesses in your story when you try to line it up. You go, oh, I really don't even have this part, or I could really use some more fleshing out over here. It's extremely useful, and it's really quick, easy way to kind of see how your structure holds up. So the thing Blake Snyder was like really famous for in terms of Saves the Cat. So Save the Cat real quick is you have your hero do something that's going to endear him to the audience. So you have a cat that needs saving. He saves the cat. Everybody's happy. Everybody wants the cat to be saved. That's something that, endears the character. But the real thing is the beat sheet, the Blake Snyder beat sheet. So it starts with opening image, which is your before world. Theme stated in the first 5%. Somebody kind of casually mentions what the story's actually going to be about. Setup goes through all the characters' current weaknesses and what needs to be changed by showing his current life. Catalyst, debate, something kind of brings them into action, into whatever the movie's going to be about or the book. Break into two. They accept the challenge. So the meat of the, he refers to it as like the poster or the trailer, is the fun and games. This is where we see the hero in their new world. The hook of the story. So everything that you're pitching in your story is in the fun and games usually. Midpoint, something changes, bad guys close in, all is lost, dark night of the soul or the whiff of death. That's where everything's rock bottom. Break into three, something from the B plot kind of connects the dots and they figure out what they need to do to advance. The finale and the final image is a mirror image of the opening image. So that whole before world where things aren't right and the character's not happy, now that's fixed and we see the status quo as it is now. So, yeah. John Truby's The Anatomy of Story. This is one similar to Story by Robert McKee that gets really into formulas. There are certain formulas in this that I run every story I create through to make sure it holds up. There's stuff like right off the bat in this that I know I've highlighted. The focal point is the moment of change, the impact when a person breaks free of habits and weaknesses and goes from his past and transforms to a richer and fuller self. So yeah, like anytime I'm thinking a story, I'm thinking, how is the person growing? How are they changing? Why do they need to change? Let me find my favorite bit of information. This formula, W times A equals C. It's weakness times action equals change. So you're thinking of the growth, the arc of your story. You're trying to get that moment of change. That's what your entire story is about. So what's the character's weakness? What's the action they take to defeat the weakness? And that's the change. Just so important, so simple, but it's like doing these puzzles and homework on your own story, you know? Symbolism, plot, metaphors, just it goes into everything. Highly recommend. Always worth having a thesaurus. Nowadays you can just look it up online, but it's always useful to know a better word for, word. Here. What's a better word for word? Name, expression, designation, concept, vocable, utterance, sound of voicing, form of speech. Word. So when you have a copy editor, you don't really need this, but The Elements of Style is a good book to have just in terms of grammar and knowing what a sentence structure should look like. It's very schoolwork. This is doing homework. This is not fun reading unless you're a copy editor. Hello, Christine. But it doesn't hurt to have this and to take a glance through if you're editing your own work, if you want it to read professionally and not have any trip ups. I used to get movie screenplays too, just to like Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind was one of my favorite movies in the mid 2000s, and just kind of reading the script as opposed to watching the movie, getting lost in the movie and the visuals and everything. Reading the script, I think I have Punch Drunk Love here too. Just gives you an appreciation for the story and the screenwriting and how they came to certain scenes. You feel it on a different level, I think. But Anne Lamott's Bird by Bird. There's a certain kind of book. There's one, Writing Down the Bones. Who writes that one? Writing Down the Bones. Natalie Goldberg. They fit into kind of a more poetic take. It's not really nitty gritty, nuts and bolts, how to write something, but it's a more kind of thoughtful look at why we write and why we tell stories. Some instructions on writing and life. It's inspirational. If you're a writer, those two books I definitely think are worth reading. Just kind of makes you appreciate the act of writing. It's poetic. It's a little harder to explain, but Bird by Bird, Writing Down the Bones, I appreciate both of those books. Okay, yeah, I almost forgot. On Writing by Stephen King. One of my favorites. Jeez, I didn't even bring it out. I just thought of it when I was looking at the Anne Lamott book, because Stephen King, so he breaks this book into, he gets to the nuts and bolts. Really technical stuff on writing. Part of it is an autobiography. He talks about coming up with his first books, what he was going through in his life when he was becoming a writer. And then, so you have your how-to writing, how he became a writer, and then a bunch of really kind of specific detailed thoughts on writing. This one I couldn't recommend it enough. It's really amazing. Super inspirational. Great book. Read it a bunch of times. Specifically for writing comics, I would recommend Brian Michael Bendis' Words for Pictures. So this is a great book. Obviously, it's got a ton of awesome art through the whole thing, so that kind of makes it fun to go through. Everything you could want here. You got script breakdowns, personal notes. I mean, I'm just opening up to random pages, and it's just all beautiful to look at. A lot of the names, Mike Allred, Bill St. Sankovic. I don't know how to pronounce it. Sienkiewicz. Sarah Pacelli, Chris Bocciolo. There's just all kinds of great names giving their advice on here, and lots of fun Q&A stuff. Pick that up. I like to get these magazines when I go out to Barnes and Noble. That's where I go to write. It's well lit there. There's always plenty of tables. I just sit down, have my coffee, and write, and it's a comfortable spot for me. And then I reward myself by checking out their magazines. And Imagine FX is a great one for art stuff. It's got reviews of art from the readers, tips and tricks, tutorials, sketchbooks, reviews of other books on art and art products, all kinds of great stuff. So this is always a fun read for me. You never know what kind of stuff you're going to find in their magazine section. They had like this book on social marketing. It's kind of outdated now because social media just goes so fast and changes so fast. This is what year was this? It's pretty old. I forget, but I think it's like 4 or 5 years old. And then this is a book on InDesign, which is always good to know for artists and writers alike. Alright, so that's about all I got for you. I just wanted to show you some of my stuff. Maybe next time I'll take just a look at my books in general, see what kind of stuff's in there. I got a big bookshelf. Or maybe just my art books. I have a lot of art books on comic book artists and animated series and stuff. That would be kind of fun to look at. Let me know in the comments. Like, comment, subscribe, stay spooky. What's up, Beelzebuddies? I am Steve. I'm here with more Let's Make Comics. I have prepared pretty much nothing for this episode. Mostly because I'm just going to kind of show you my art supplies. I had an experimental last few years, so I've been using lots of different gouaches and fluid acrylic paints and all kinds of crazy stuff. So I'll show you the Bristol boards and the Winsor Newton Series 7, and I'll show you some of the other stuff I've been using. But just going to kind of dive into a bunch of tools, and I figure there's not a whole lot of preparation I can do, so I'm just going to kind of wing this one. So you can't make comics without comic supplies. You've got your traditional 11 by 17 Bristol board. You can buy that at any art store or online. More common, you'll find 14 by 17. So I've used 14 by 17 and trimmed off, 3 inches. You got your T-square, your pencils, your India ink, or whatever kind of ink you're using. I mean, there's not a whole lot you need to make comics, but this is just kind of a fun art video, so bear with me, and I'll show you the stuff I've been using. Okay, so let's get straight off the bat here. We'll go into our comic book supplies. This right here, Bristol board. It is nice texture. You can get it like pre-printed with these light blue lines that show you common panel divides, so you can split it into thirds or quarters or down the half. If you're doing like comic pages and stuff. When I'm doing a comic page, I usually leave, I think I do like a ½ inch on each side and a full inch on the top and bottom as just kind of a border, because you want to have room for, when it's printing and when it's scanning and stuff, you want to have a little bit of room for bleed, it's called, which kind of like goes off the page and may or may not show up in the final print. Let's see here. Let's take a look at what pencils I have. Let's see here. This is my crazy thing full of stuff, I call it. I don't actually call it that. I have these Micron markers. A lot of people use Micron because it's archival. It doesn't fade. A lot of regular ink over time will start to turn brownish and it'll get fuzzy and stuff. These will pretty much just look like the way they look forever. Let's see here. Now the pencils I use, hold that thought. Here's a couple. I use these turquoise pencils. I have a 4B and a 3B. It's not a real great difference here, but I'll show you. I'll demonstrate some different ones. Artist pencils differentiate from hardness to softness. So your standard yellow school pencil, I think it's like it's an HB or a 2B or something. The harder it gets, so when you get to a 3H, a 4H, you'll get very crisp, clean lines, but they become very light. So a lot of times when I'm sketching something out and I'm doing very rough images, I'll use like a 4 or 5H, and it's super light. And then when you get into the Bs, they become softer. This one's a 4B. It's got a very, that's not going to go in focus, is it? It's got a very soft, kind of thicker look, but it gets a lot darker too. And those are more likely to smudge. So when you're drawing, you're going to get a lot of pencil all over your hand and stuff with those soft, darker pencils. This right here is a Winsor Newton Series 7 brush. It's like the go-to brush for a comic book artist. Usually you'll get, I think, a 3 or a 4. Right now, it looks kind of floofy, we'll say. But when you get it wet, this is not a great brush, but it'll come to a point. And the cool thing about a Series 7 is it kind of has this shape, this kind of thick bottom and this thin top that comes to a point. When you're just using the little top point, you can make these very thin lines. And when you press on it, you get a lot more of that badunk-a-dunk of the brush. You know, you get a real thick line to it. So you can get that thin to thick line that a lot of comic book inkers look for. Now, they've been making these guys better and better. This is a Pentel pocket brush. So it's basically, it's like a Winsor Newton. It's like that kind of brush thing where you can go very thin to very thick, and you trade out little ink cartridges in the pen. So you have that like to go. You don't have to dip it in the ink. But if you're using your Winsor 7, this is what I use. It's a, what's it called? Bombay. It's Dr. P.H. Martin's Bombay Black India ink. I like this one because it's a very dark black line. When I was doing Emo Boy, I had Sophie Campbell did a pinup for me, and she gave me the original art, and it's one of my prized possessions. It's so beautiful, and the ink on it is so incredibly black. And I asked what it was that she used to get that black ink, and she told me Sumi ink, S-U-M-I, and I have not tried it yet, but it's on my to-do list because it's really cool looking. Now let's say you make a mistake. What are you going to do? You got this guy right here. This is a kneaded eraser. You can stretch it and rip it apart. If it's new, it stretches. If it's old like this one, it rips apart. But that's how you clean it. So first off, you can mold it into shapes. Make like a little point there if you need to. You can make it big so you can cover lots of the paper. It doesn't leave little dusty bits like a normal eraser would. It's very clean, so it just picks up that pencil and doesn't make any mess. When it's full of pencil lead, you rip it up and it cleans itself. So, kneaded eraser. That's good for erasing. I don't know. Also, I was talking about 14 by 17. These Borden and Riley Paris paper for pens, it's a little bit thinner than Bristol board, but It's a very smooth, bright paper. It takes ink perfectly. It's like a thin kind of convenient version of Bristol board. It's not as thick and bulky as Bristol board is. So I use a lot of this stuff. This is pretty good too. It's maybe not the best for if you're going to use a lot of watercolor or something, because it is a little bit thinner than Bristol board is, so it's not going to take quite as much, but great for inking. Oh, let's see. What should we talk about next? Watercolors. Painting. Here, so these are my new watercolors that I got maybe a year ago. It's a professional Winsor Newton series. Comes with all these different colors here. You got your trays for mixing stuff. Just add some water and pick it up. I like the cakes, the pans, whatever you want to call them, as opposed to the tubes, although I do use the tubes as well. They're just so much easier. I'll use my Series 7, but I'll use cheap brushes. I mean, I've gotten into the professional watercolors, but I haven't really moved into professional brushes because that's an expensive hobby. This guy, toothbrush. And I'm not for brushing my teeth. Whenever I go to the dentist and they give me one of these, I'm like, yes, new toothbrush. I use it for splattering. So you just kind of take your ink, drop a few things on there. This is messy, so you want to make sure you have newspaper and stuff stretched out, but get some good ink on there and you just flicker it. Just kind of do this right here. And it just flickers the paint, splatters all over. It's great for shading and texture. Got masking fluid. So this is especially for watercolors. So let's say you have a character standing against a starry night or whatever. So you'd put the masking fluid over the character and it dries, and then you paint the entire background, you splash your water, you do all the things, and then you peel off, once it's all dry, you peel off the masking fluid, and then you can go in and paint the foreground. It hasn't been touched with all the stuff, so that way you're not kind of finessing all around the corners. You can just kind of go wide with it. And so I watched Scott Fisher on Instagram. He was doing these Inktober pieces on like old ledger art, and he was painting with this like watercolor kind of substance, but it was opaque, so you could paint, you know, color on top of color, and you could use white. And what is that stuff? It's FW acrylic ink, so it's like acrylic paint, but it's the consistency of ink, so it's very wet, watery, but it's opaque. I'll show you how some of this stuff works. Here we go, FW, here's blue. So I've been using these, and I've been using PH Martin. They also make, it's like a watercolor, but it's really, really bright, high pigmented watercolor. It's very intense, these things. The one problem I have with those is if you try to use any kind of white, like the FW white ink over it, it just absorbs all that color. So if I use a bright orange fluorescent paint, it looks beautiful, but when I try to put white over it, let's say I'm making little stars on top of it, it just absorbs all the orange. It will not stay white. So that's the one problem with that stuff, but otherwise it looks beautiful. Here's some fluid acrylics. I've been using these more and more lately. The cool thing about these are, as you can see here, that right there is its transparency. So you can see that the black lines kind of go right through it. It's very watercolor-esque in that if I have an inked page and I use these fluid acrylics, similar to the FW inks, except they're actually more transparent. So here you've got ink that you can't see through, it's opaque, and then you've got acrylic that you can see through. Sometimes you feel like a nut, sometimes you don't. And so I will use these. Often I'll just take like a paper towel. I won't even use a brush. I'll pour some of this on like I don't have one readily available, but on a palette, a disposable palette. I'll go ahead and I'll get the paper towel and I'll just kind of smear it around just to play with color and put down a whole bunch of color. I've been very messy lately with my art, so these are pretty cool too. All right, back to the couch. Alright, so just a quick little update on what's going on in all things Steve. We've got sketchbook dissections going on over on Instagram. I'm going to bring that over to YouTube too. Just look at more sketchbooks. We're going to look at my sketchbooks, look at Chan's sketchbooks. Once Upon a Midnight Gaming, it's going to be twice a month up until I think May. Then we're going to scale back to once a week. Once Upon a Midnight Gaming is going twice every week on Mondays and Fridays. We're going to scale that back to just Fridays, I think, starting in May. For Let's Make Comics, we've got this video. We've got a big happy face post-mortem video. So the post-mortem videos, I'm going to do a series of these. Kind of almost documentary-like, longer form videos, really dissecting different projects I've done. So we have Emo Boy, Happy Face, Wintertown, Bright Lights, Dark Nights, First Offerings, the Kickstarter for Machina Corp. So we'll just kind of look at full scope. This is Let's Make Comics, so I'm just going to talk about where the concepts came from, how I made them, the whole backstory, the release, the whole story, the whole life that goes into making a book or a comic. And then kind of examine the process removed from it. What could I have done better? What worked really well? So hopefully anybody that's looking to create books or comics or make anything can get something out of that. So I'm really excited about those. The first one will be Happy Face coming up this month. After that, I'm going to do a series of smaller conversations with Chan. We're going to talk about some stuff that she can speak more to that I can't. She's got more knowledge in conventions and selling prints and her Patreon stuff, networking, social media. There's a lot of stuff that she's good at and has done that I haven't done or that I'm not as knowledgeable about, I guess. So going to do a series of conversations with Chan through April. And part of this is because I want to finally focus on this webcomic that I've been talking about forever. So this is the year that I'm going to be launching Have Heart, which is my horror webcomic. And I don't want to spill too much about it. I don't want to talk about it too much at this point because it's still kind of being developed. I'm figuring out how I want it to look. What exactly is the story going to be? I think I want to leave it kind of open-ended so I can explore and find the story as I'm going, which I think is something kind of interesting about the webcomic medium. So I'm going to talk so much more about that in the future, but I've spent so much energy this year working on Let's Make Comics, on Once Upon a Midnight Gaming, on sketchbook dissections, trying to get this YouTube thing rolling. And I mean, it hasn't exploded or anything, but I feel like we've got it rolling. We're going to kind of fine-tune what the schedule is going to be, and I think I can ease back enough that I can actually start focusing on this comic, which is primarily what I want to do this year. My goal is to launch it in April still. I know we're cutting it close. I mean, we're partway through March already. By the time I finish up this Happy Face video and start editing all this stuff for April, it's going to be there. And I mean, am I going to have the website, the logo, the pages and all that stuff? I don't know. I'm trying. I really want to get this going because that's important to me, and I'm really excited to share that with you. But I just wanted to give you guys an update. That's kind of what's coming up over the next couple months. YouTube's still going strong. Instagram, Twitter, all that stuff. Please follow, comment. Phone's ringing. Jersey City, New Jersey. I don't know anybody in New Jersey. I'm gonna say no to that one. But yeah, we could use your support. We are trying so hard to grow. It's not easy in these early months here. Gonna do more promotion once we have some great videos up. There's some really funny gaming videos coming up. This Happy Face video I'm super excited about, and hopefully you guys find something here today with this tools of the trade. I don't know. I know when I was a teenager and I was getting into comics, I was fascinated by what materials comic book artists use. I remember there was this documentary on Image Comics, and I saw Rob Liefeld inking something with his brush, and I was like, oh my god, that's the coolest thing. There's this guy, Brian Romero, that worked at this comic book store that I grew up next to, and he was a comic book artist. He's very talented, and he was pitching stuff to Marvel, and I would just fanboy, and he'd show me his sketchbooks and all these brushes and stuff, and I just found that stuff fascinating. So hopefully you do too. Hopefully you get something out of this. If so, like, comment, subscribe. ring the bell. It really does help all these algorithms and show YouTube that this is a page that people are interested in, and it can help get the videos recommended to other people, and that's how growth happens. So we really appreciate it. This is my Alf impression. Hey Willie! No, this is my Willie impression. Alf. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed the video. That was a lot of fun. Next week is the big happy face video, unless somehow I fail to do it or it becomes so big that I don't get it done, in which case patience is your friend and it'll be worth it, unless it sucks and I don't do it at all, in which case shame on me. This has been Let's Make Comics. Like, comment, subscribe, ring the bell, be a responsible YouTube patron. Our lives depend on it. And stay spooky, my friends. So the story of Happy Face begins with me in New York at Comic-Con, kind of down on my luck, selling what remains of Emo Boy, which was the comic I did prior to any of this happening. My only published work at that point was this comic book, Emo Boy, published by Slave Labor Graphics. This is the mid-2000s, so I believe this was like 2007. Emo Boy had come to an end. We had run 11 issues which were printed, and we did one digital only issue. We had our trade paperback collections, and it was over. So for all intents and purposes, I was trying to figure out what I was going to do next. I'm at this convention, I'm selling comics. I met this editor at Little Brown Books for Young Readers, Connie Shu, who would change my life from that point. A few days after the con, I get an email from this Connie stating she works at Little Brown Books for Young Readers, and she had a conversation with me and bought my comic book Emo Boy, and she thought I had a great voice for young adult, asked me if I had any ideas for writing a book or doing young adult novels. So first thing I was like, Little Brown Books for Young Readers, never heard of it, let me look this up. It's the company that published Catcher in the Rye, like they're pretty legit. So I say, sure, yeah, absolutely. I have plenty of ideas. I would love to do young adult novels.
I was volunteering at the LBYR booth at the New York Comic-Con, where I met Stephen Emond, who was signing his Emo Boy comic book series. I walked up to his booth, picked up Emo Boy, read it, liked it, and decided he should write a book. I was young, green, and naive, so I approached him with the line, "Hey, do you want to write a book?" I didn't even have a business card or anything proving that I was from Little Brown, but for some reason Steve believed me. He said he was definitely into YA and that he had ideas galore. I later found out that he didn't. A few weeks later, Alvina and I met Steve for lunch, and he had 7 ideas on hand, each concept typed up on full-color one-sheets with art. Steve had many amazing ideas, running the gamut from a metaphysical sci-fi fantasy romance adventure involving a reimagined Greek underworld to a realistic story told through journal entries about a boy, a family tragedy, and how he reinvents himself to hide from his painful past. It was called Happy Face, and there was something about it that felt really raw, honest, and compelling, even though the description was under 300 words. It spoke to both Alvina and me, and we both agreed that we should pursue Happy Face. Connie Shu.
So I met with Alvina and Connie at a restaurant in New York, and I brought several ideas that I was able to kind of whip up. I was not confident in what young adult even was, so I was trying to do my research. The one book that I read and really loved was Perks of Being a Wallflower. That one, the kind of shy protagonist, teen, awkward male who had a hard time fitting in. I was like, that's me. Like, I could write this. I've lived this. I could do young adult. I know young adult. I came up with 7 different pitches, and I made little graphics and art and brought this little folder of pitches with me. Spent most of the lunch talking about Dawson's Creek and Beverly Hills 90210 and teenage shows that I loved. But I was able to pitch these different ideas. One of them was a grandiose sci-fi epic that's turned into this horror webcomic that I'm currently working on. So this has been around for a decade. One of them was Norma Nobody, the girl who was desperate to get any class superlative, and every book she would be trying to be the best at something. And one of them was Happy Face. And Happy Face kind of started from literally just writing down that title and thinking about a character who was pretending to be happy but was hurt inside. So we did go over those. The two that Connie and Elvina liked were the sci-fi epic, which seemed like a big commercial book, and Happy Face, which seemed like a quieter literary tale. We decided that I should try to do the Happy Face book. So Connie sent me some more books to read, more stuff in the young adult genre, things published by Little Brown, and she sent me Cormier's I Am the Cheese, which is a classic book about a unreliable narrator, which was kind of the big hook, the literary hook of Happy Face, is that he's somebody that's telling you a story, but he's not telling you the full story. He's not telling you about the damage inside, he's telling you about his exciting new life and his new friends. So she wanted me to read something with an unreliable narrator to kind of get that into my head. So from that point on, in mid-2007, I was considering myself an author now. I was done with comic books. Emo Boy had tanked and gone away. I was done with that world. I wanted to move on. I'm going to be a literary novelist and write this big, grandiose, indie darling book kind of thing. And I had my new career set out. I was going to be an author now. So the following months, I'm learning that maybe I'm not fully prepared to be an author yet. Turns out it's difficult to write a book. I had to read a lot. I was reading more than I ever read in my life. Reading books about writing and how to structure a novel, reading actual young adult novels. So this is 2007. This is about a year after a major breakup in my life. I had just moved to a new place. I had a lot of change going on in my life. I was making new friends and trying to adjust to that. So much going on, and on top of that, I'm trying to write a book. And in addition to that, I'm actually writing an Emo Boy movie, which also came out of New York Comic Con. Dan at SLG spoke to some people at a movie company. This guy that had taken the Shrek children's books and made like a movie out of them, and they wanted to move into live action. They had tried obtaining the rights to Scott Pilgrim, but that went to Edgar Wright. So they thought Emo Boy could be a movie. So I'm trying to write a movie and trying to write Happy Face at the same time. And these are both by far the biggest things I've ever had in my career. And they both kind of fell into my lap at the same time. Let me just back up a bit for a second. In a lot of ways, it seems like this was very fortuitous and that this kind of fell into my lap and that I lucked out, and this editor from this major publisher just happened to send me an email and say, hey, do you want to write a book? Which isn't how it happens. So there was a lot of luck. There was a lot of opportunity to strike at the exact right time, but I was able to take advantage of the opportunity because of the work I had done. I've drawn my entire life since I was a kid. I mean, I've always wanted to be an artist. I've always wanted to be a comic book artist. Writing is something that came to me in high school, and I wanted to write these comics about my friends and myself and in our world in high school there. And I had been writing and I had been drawing and creating characters for as long as I've known how to. So it's something that I've spent my entire life getting to this point where I was able to pitch a comic book that got published and write 12 issues of that comic book, each one of those having the beginning and the middle and the end, learning over years and years, working on my comic strip, trying to figure out how a story works. So by the time I got this email that said, hey, do you have any ideas for a young adult book? I was able to put my head into that world and come up with some ideas and capitalize on that. So in a lot of ways, yeah, I was really lucky and the timing was great. And in a lot of ways, it's something that I prepared my whole life for. So I always tell people that are interested in publishing, do it because you love it and because you have to do it. And then when you get that lucky break, knock on wood, hopefully you get that lucky break. Hopefully those things come together at just the right moment. I remember telling my therapist that I wasn't a big networker and that I don't network, and everything I've done on my own, which isn't true because I went to that convention and I was meeting people at that convention. That's networking. That lucky break came from me going to a convention and selling my book. If I hadn't done that, I never would have met Connie. Anyways, that's my little story about that. So I'm working on the book. I'm working on the movie. I'm having a hard time doing both of those things. I understand how a story works instinctively, but I don't quite know how structure works and how a Hollywood movie is supposed to look and how a full 300-page novel is supposed to read. So I'm getting lots and lots of notes, and I'm getting worried that I'm gonna mess both of these things up. The movie happened in 2008, which was in the middle of a writer's strike. I wasn't part of the guild, so I was able to actually go through and write the movie instead of them just hiring a different writer to do that. That's how I got that job. So this, in addition with the breakup and the move and the new friends and the new job and all the stuff going on in my life, I started having these really bad anxiety attacks and depression. I went to a doctor, and I remember telling the doctor that I don't know what I need, but I have to write this book. This book is everything to me, and I need to be able to just sit and focus and think about this book and write. And I can't. My brain's going a million miles a minute. I'm having these really bad anxiety attacks, and I can't write. So he gave me some, I think it was Prozac, and I tried it, and it completely leveled out the anxiety to the point that I'd be staring into space and not thinking anything. After like a couple days of that, I decided I don't want to do that. Like, clearly I'm having a hard time, but it's situational and I know why it's happening, and I'm just gonna kind of push through it. But it was a rough time for a bit there, trying to get all these things going. So back to writing, the concept of happy face. Trying to figure out how do you flesh out an entire book of kid pretending to be happy. I kind of took from where I was in my life. I had just moved. I had just left a relationship that I was very comfortable in and was kind of adapting to a new world. So that's kind of what I put Happy Face through. I put him in this new world, and he was making new friends, and that's where he was doing this social experiment of what happens if I put on this happy face and I become a different person than I was in my old school. I had enough things going on at that time that I felt like I had enough emotions to tap into and things that I could talk about, that the story started to come together. Another thing was Connie was pushing for me to use art in my book. I was kind of dead set against it at first because I had just come from the comic book world and I felt like they didn't support Emo Boy. The sales just started low and went lower. I was kind of excited to make that jump over into becoming an author, and I just wanted to start from scratch and just write a book, and that was my only concern. Connie's point was that I could draw, so why would I not use that? Not every author can draw, and it gives me an advantage on my first book. So I gave it some thought. I started thinking, well, if I did this as a sketchbook journal that he's writing in, there's a lot of things I could do for the character that I couldn't do otherwise. Like, what if he's just not talking for a month and he's just drawing things? And what if when he starts to get manic and crazed towards the end, he just starts scribbling things and the writing gets sloppy? So all these things that I got kind of excited about are things that you actually can't do. Like, we had to use a font that could be translated into other languages. We can't make it illegible. She didn't want pages and pages and pages of no story. So none of those things happened, but I got excited enough about the things I could do that I came on board for using art in the book. So we finally have enough for a pitch. At this point, it's been a few months. I don't know if we're into 2008 at this point. Connie wants to bring it to the sales team. First, she's got to get it approved by all the editors that she works with. Then she's got to get it approved by, that's the acquisitions team. And then she's got to get it approved by a sales team that thinks, okay, we can take this idea, go out on the town and sell this idea, this book to stores and markets and whatever. So she's got to get pretty much everybody in her company on board for Happy Face. I, naive as I was like, great, go ahead, do it. Let me know when we're ready. We'll finish up this book. I didn't realize that she was as nervous about it as she was.
After nearly a year of developing the outline, shaping the story, and working on art and design, Steve finally had a full outline and 70 or so pages with the text and art fully laid out. Like Diary of a Wimpy Kid, the text and art complemented each other, and each page/spread as its own design. At this point, Steve wasn't even signed up yet. He had done all this fantastic work on spec, and now it was up to me to bring it to our acquisitions committee. I was a wreck. What if it didn't pass? What would I tell Steve? Where would I hide so he couldn't hunt me down and make me pay for wasting a year of his life? Fortunately, it passed, and I nearly passed out when I heard the news. Connie Shu.
She told me later, like, the whole way she approached me about writing a book is totally not how it goes, and she was totally out of line. She was nervous for months, like, what if he can't write a book? Like, what if it comes out bad and I've wasted months and months of his life on this thing? Luckily, we did good, and she got it through the acquisition team, through the sales team. She called me up and we've got a book, we're doing this. So that was exciting, and I was off to the races then from there. So for the next half a year or so, I'm taking monthly trips up to New York to go over chapters and notes with Connie and talk things out. I'm holed up in my studio apartment working on Emo Boy and working on Happy Face, having some challenges with the story, but otherwise moving forward at a good pace. There were certain chapters that she felt didn't fit in or weren't as good as some of the other chapters I had written, so trying to find ways to get a certain idea across, but like not the way that I had written it. The original ideas I had were darker. A lot of them were a little too dark. Some of the language was not just too adult but aggressive, like there was some ugly language and bullying in there. I remember there was one part where he throws himself down the stairs, and I remember like his mouth was all bloody, so he had like the happy face but his mouth was all busted up and he was laughing, and she's like, that's kind of nightmarish, maybe we don't put that in there. The Gretchen character had this backstory that was almost so emotionally ambitious and grand that she thought it kind of overshadowed Happy Face's story. So we ended up scaling way back on telling Gretchen's story and just kind of used it as fuel to write the character and know where she's coming from, but not have it, be more dramatic or grand than what Happy Face was going through. By the time I got to the end, this is stupid. I mean, it's crazy that I didn't see what I was doing until I could look at it in full retrospect. I mean, I was writing about a kid whose family was split up and he moved to a new town and started a new life. I was writing about what I went through in high school. I was writing about my own parents' divorce, moving in with my grandparents, starting a new life and having a chip on my shoulder and not wanting to be the person I was before. I mean, it's something that I lived and I went through, and I didn't know I was writing it like the entire time, and it's as clear as day. But I thought I had come up with this concept of Happy Face and I was telling his story. Even a major character death in the book is taken from real life. It's not the same person who died in my life that died in the book. There's things that I would take from life and I would change the characters around, but I would keep the emotions. That's something that I've kind of kept in my storytelling, like to this day. I try to think of what a story is going to be, and then I think, okay, well, what is it that I know that I can write about that's going to get me these emotions? So I find a way to kind of take these real life experiences and kind of cloak them in a different story so that I can tell that story as accurately as possible. And so that it's something that's interesting for me to talk about. You know, it's that self-expression and wanting to write therapeutically. And this was a very therapeutic book. This was something that I absolutely had to write. We just had a few more steps before the book would come out, so we had to get it to copy editing. So Christine Ma does. She did the copy editing on all of my books, and working with a copy editor, I think I described it once as trying to have a conversation with somebody, but every single sentence they interrupt you and say, could you clarify that? And did you mean to say this? And you actually said that in the last sentence, and you used this word twice there. You might not want to do that. And I actually fact checked that, and that's not quite accurate. I think you could actually do this. So it sounds horribly annoying. Apologies to Christine, but it makes the book so much better. And if you think you don't need a copy editor, every single sentence of a full book had at least one note on it. Most sentences had more than one note. So she's worth her weight in gold. Everybody go out and hire Christine Ma. Next up was the cover. So the cover was done by Ben Montner. I tried designing my own book cover for it, and it was just like drawings and sketches and little writings, and this is so simple and so iconic, and it's so brilliant, especially if you see the hardcover. The hardcover has like a flap that covers just half of it, and so you see the smiley face, and when you look under the cover, it's a frowning face, and it's the entire story in one image. It's just brilliant. And the number of emails that I got that started with, I saw this bright yellow book staring at me from the bookcase. I don't think the book would have been as successful if it had any other cover than this. So at this point, we're just kind of months away from publication, which was in May of 2010. I get a call and I'm at work, and it's from Connie. And Connie and Alvina are on the line, and they're so excited. And you got your first review from Publishers Weekly. It's a starred review. And they were so excited to tell me, and I had no idea what a starred review is. I was like, yeah, good review. Awesome. Of course it's a good review. I wrote the book. It's an awesome book. Like, I was so naive. I didn't understand what a big deal this was. This is my debut book, locked into publishing it. Everything was very fortuitous and smooth. Fortuitous, is that the right word? But everything was going just right, and so we got this first review, and I nearly wept when I heard the review because it was just so passionate, and I felt like I really did something good. So a starred review, there's 6 major publications that can give you a starred review, and that means of everything we reviewed this month, we especially recommend this book. We're giving it our stamp of approval. So a book can have no stars. It can be well reviewed and have no stars. You can get 1 star, 2 star, you can get all the way up to 6 stars. Happy Face took 3 stars. 3 out of 6 of those publications gave it a starred review, and that was my first book. Wintertown and Bright Lights, Dark Nights each got 2 stars. So Happy Face is still the best reviewed book that I did. And for that to be my debut experience was just unheard of. Like, that was as good as that could have gone. Now that day that I'm at work and I get that call and I'm told about the starred review, this day will always stand out in my mind because one of my coworkers announced that she was pregnant and she was having her 3rd child. And it was the talk of the office. Oh my God, congrats, we're so happy for you. And I remember explaining to somebody, I just got my first book review. It's a starred review. And the blank face that I got and this kind of, oh, you wrote a book and it got a good review? Okay, that's weird. And I was like, that's Connecticut. There was a part of me that wanted so bad to leave Connecticut that day because I felt like nobody really understood me or what I was trying to do, and getting married and having the babies and moving into the house is the Connecticut life. And writing your book and getting a starred review is, okay, that's a cool hobby. That's Connecticut. So the good reviews kept coming in. Kirkus gave me a good review. Connie told me Kirkus is notoriously harsh and notoriously hard to get a good review from, so to get a starred review from them was a big deal. And then Voya also gave me a starred review. The things that they would say about my book just really filled me with a lot of pride and joy. And then the book came out and I got fan mail. So I started getting emails from people saying this book changed my life and I was Happy Face and I knew a happy face. It became known as a book for reluctant readers for two basic reasons. One, because I was a male author. Boys tended to be reluctant readers, so to have a young adult coming of age novel from a male point of view, and then also having art was kind of a bridge from comic books and graphic novels to reading novels. So it was a book that was often referred to as a book for reluctant readers. If somebody's not generally a reader, this is one they might like. Visual novels, especially with Diary of a Wimpy Kid, became a huge thing. I like to think that Happy Face itself was influential in the rise of visual novels, but it was a pretty rare thing. There were not many, if not like in this, probably enough that you could fit on one hand. And since then it's kind of exploded into its own genre, but at the time it was still pretty new. So this is a post-mortem, and I'm telling you everything there is to know about Happy Face, so I'll talk about numbers a bit. So the advance they gave me was for $12,000, which means this is what we think we can sell for this book. We're going to give you this amount to write it, and they give you part of it on signing, part of it on delivery, part of it on publication. So Happy Face ended up doing so well that it earned out its advance multiple times over. So until you reach a point of sales where they've made their $12,000 back, you don't get anything else aside from the $12,000 they gave you. After that, you start earning royalties. So I remember getting a royalty check for $10,000. I got a royalty check for $5,000. So every 6 months I'd get another royalty check as it continued to sell. It's definitely the best-selling thing that I'd ever written. Postmortem time, reviewing. How do I think this went? I think Happy Face went as magically and perfectly as it could have gone. Would I have changed anything? I think my art is better now than it was then. I'd probably draw it a little better. I think I know more writing tricks and more about writing, but I don't know that I would change any of it because I feel like there's a sense of innocence that's lost in knowing too much, which sounds more grandiose than I mean it, but when you know so much about structure and writing and making everything perfect and this is the way it's supposed to be and it's got to do this, that, Happy Face was so much me exploring writing and storytelling and my story. It just came purely from my heart. It was a heart project, and it was something that I don't think I could have written the same way at any other point in my career. It had to be written that way at that time. And I think it kind of comes across as very authentic, and it may not be the most polished thing in the world, but it's very pure and it is what it is, and I think it's relatable and it's something that people connect to in a special way because of that. Happy Face was my life for 3 years. It's such an important book to me that I can't imagine wanting to change anything about it. The low points of working on Happy Face were learning how to write, the stress of doing that and doing the movie at the same time, all the life upheaval stuff. It was a very stressful time at the beginning. It was also extremely exciting time, going to New York and going to the Little Brown offices and meeting with Connie and stopping in and saying hello to the sales team. I mean, those were really exciting, cool moments to be an author and feel like, being an author is a good thing for an introvert to be, because so much of it is sitting at home, holed up by yourself with your brain and a laptop, just putting your ideas out there and living through your characters and building this world that comes from your head. And then you go to these conventions and suddenly people are asking for autographs and, oh my God, you're an author, can you sign this book, and can you do a talk over here? And you're standing in front of audiences of people and you're traveling and people are, taking you out to dinner and getting a car for you, and like you're a celebrity for a weekend. And some authors are really good at being celebrities. I think they're more in tune with their extrovert self, and they can dazzle audiences, and they know just what to say, and they love getting up there, and they're invited to all the conventions. I'm not that person so much. I mean, it is fun, and you get swept into it, and then you got to go back home, and the whole time you're home, you're like, oh, I don't want to go out and travel, and I'm so nervous, and I don't want to talk in front of a big group of people. And then you do it, and you're a celebrity for a week or a few days, and you come back home and you're like, oh, nobody's doting on me, and I'm all by myself, and I gotta just sit here and write again. And then suddenly it's difficult for a week. The high points of doing Happy Face, I think, were getting those great reviews. It's such a acknowledgement that, okay, maybe I'm not an imposter. Like, maybe I deserve to write a book. Maybe I do have some talent. Getting the fan mail, I always think of every piece of fan mail I get as if somebody read one of my books and they were touched enough to the point that they wanted to write me and let me know how much it meant to them. That's my kind of person, because that means they relate to me, because my books are so personal. If somebody read my book and they identified with it, then I'm like, cool, you're a good person. you're a friend of Steve then, because it's almost like saying, I relate to you and I appreciate what you've been through and the way you think. I don't know, maybe that means nothing. And just having the book published, I mean, having the hardcover book, when I first got the package from Little Brown, and it's got a big bow tie on it, and a card from Connie saying congrats, it's a real thing, you birthed the book, and having that thing to hold, and especially something like Happy Face where there's so much art in it. It's not just words, like it's a piece of art now, and it's real, and it's professional, and it's printed, and everything just amazing looking. So having the book was a high point. It's a cool experience that I recommend. Okay, one last story. The book launch party. So I was nervous about having a book launch party. I didn't want to do it. I don't want to stand in front of people and talk. I think I prepared for 20 minutes, and then they told me at the last minute, like, typically our authors go 45 minutes. So I was like, okay, I got to double the length of my speech now. Something that I was super nervous about. And so Connie and Alvina were actually going to come in from New York. So this was in Madison, my hometown, or where I lived with my grandparents, just down the street from them at R.J. Julia's, which is a really well-known indie bookstore in Connecticut, and I think nationally known as like a good spot for authors to go. A lot of big names go there and have their talks. So it's kind of cool that I was having a book release party there, and then I got to have a talk there, but very nervous about it. Alvina and Connie took the train in from New York because they wanted to be there for it. They were going to take me out to dinner beforehand and asked me if I wanted to invite any people. I kind of didn't want to. I just wanted to get through with the day. I didn't want to do anything else. And my grandmother wanted me to have everybody over afterwards, and they could all come have cake. And I didn't want to do that either. I was like, that's embarrassing, and I don't have parties. I'm not going to invite a bunch of people over to my grandparents' house. So it was a very nerve-wracking day. There also turned out to be a massive storm that day, like downpours of rain, like tree branches in the streets, like a horrible, like near hurricane storm that day. So I did invite some people to this dinner. At one point, Connie said, "Are these all your ex-girlfriends?" I said, "No, 2 of them are ex-girlfriends. The other ones are just friends." But she thought I had like gathered all these ex-girlfriends of mine to show them, like, I'm an author now. This is my fancy dinner. Definitely not the case. The book release party turned out to be a pretty big success. I think there were like 40 people there, which, I don't know, maybe 40 doesn't sound like a lot of people, but in a small indie bookstore, like, it was pretty packed, considering the weather and everything, that all those people showed up, and not just friends and family like the Wintertown book release party went. These were like just people that showed up. My old art teacher was there. My family was there, but a whole bunch of like students and teens were there. So Connie did like a whole introduction for me. So I'm in the back and they're getting my microphone set up. Connie stood up and introduced me and read a letter that she had received from somebody and talked about what a big deal this was, and they welcomed me out, and I did good. I was funny, and everybody had questions and participated. Unbeknownst to me, my grandmother was going around inviting everybody to her house afterwards, so that party was happening whether I wanted it or not. So afterwards, we all went to my grandparents' house, which again was like maybe 5 minutes down the street. Connie and Alvina... Sorry, I have a hard time talking about my grandparents. So Connie and Alvina got to see, my bedroom where I grew up and the house I had lived in since I was 14 years old. My grandparents got to meet a lot of my current friends. It was a big deal that they got to experience that and they got to see that stuff. My grandmother in particular always called herself my number one fan. She read anything I did, whether it was just comic books I made for myself or my old comic strips. I would always bring them to her to read. I don't think everybody in my family, or even most people in my family, read Happy Face or any of my books, which is fine. It's not everybody's a reader, and if you're a reader, you want to read what you want to read. Not everybody's into young adult. But my grandmother always read what I wrote. She made all these happy face cookies, these little yellow cookies with a happy face on them, and she had this whole t-shirt with a happy face. She was beside herself over it. She actually got me on TV for this too. She would write like newspapers and media outlets. My grandson is a local author and you should have him on. And so I was on like the Connecticut local news style segment. Could not have gone worse. I was terrible. I was so stiff and awkward. It was bad, but she loved this stuff, and I don't know. That's part of Happy Face. The writing of it, so much of it was about that time in my life when I left one town for the other and I came to live with my grandparents, and they changed my life. And they were healthy and well for the Happy Face experience. Less so with each additional book, and now neither of them are with us. So Happy Face was a very special time. It was a very special time in my life. For me.